6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
How about we do it again?
6, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I fought it.
Okay, let's try one more
I
time.
definitely didn't.
Ready?
I can move you. Making review. Making review.
Say 6,
6,
5,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to the 151st episode of Rank and Review. You have found another special episode, in fact the first of a 3-part episode in which myself, Mr. Lee Beckmann, and Mr. Jason Dubray are going to rank the top 30 movies from 2000 to 2009, the best of the noughties. I am, as always, your host and random Canadian Larry Parsons, and I should warn you in advance that there will be some coarse language, there will be some spoilers, and there will be a lot of movie talking going on. So be prepared for that. As always, I am your host and random Canadian Larry Parsons. Please send your feedback to ranknreview@gmail.com. That's ranknreview@gmail.com. The website is ranknreview.ca, and if you would like to support a fellow local podcast to me called The Terror Table, I think they're really good and I think they deserve your ears. It's a big episode and it's the first of 3, so I'm not going to bore you with a long introduction. Let's get to it. Welcome to the best of the 2000s. In this first edition of our ranks, we're going to be discussing basically our ranks from 30 to 21, and we are going to do a full-length review of the Lars von Trier's film ANTICHRIST and Jeepers Creepers. So, enjoy. Jason Dubray, Lee Beckmann.
Yo.
It's going to be a long day. I hope you guys are comfortable. I hope everybody's dug in. We're going to be discussing the top 30 horror movies of the noughties. All 3 of us have our own list.
Yo.
And we're going to be reviewing 6 films that every one of us picked 2 of the selections that we're going to be reviewed over this however long it takes us to get this done.
Yo.
Jason, you and I discussed the 1900s, and Lee and I have discussed the 1970s and the 1980s.
Yo.
And I do think that each decade does very much have their own distinct kind of feel and flavor.
Yep.
There's not an exception here. The noughties, as I'm calling them, were very much, they had a much harder edge than the 90s.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I feel like the horror came back.
There's a real sense of nihilism, and even the horror movies that were kind of fun, and you've mentioned this, they're gonna appear sort of like low on the list. This is when horror really hit that primordial nerve. Especially in the States, over Europe, we see it too with like what I would call the French New Wave of horror.
The French Extreme happened, that's for sure.
Yeah, but torture porn, which had been sort of existing more over in Asia and in Europe, really reared its ugly head in North America.
And it's hard to say if it's the snapback from the Scream phenomenon where everything was winking and fun and meta.
You talked about that with the 90s show.
Yeah. Or was it, as often said, just a reflection of the zeitgeist in history, post 9/11, right?
9/11
we're living in the wake of a tragedy, so these stories somehow hit home more.
Yeah.
I feel like with comedy and horror, they both took on a real edge that hadn't happened for a while. And because I've noticed, like the last however many podcasts, you're constantly balancing the very politically correct world we're living in. And it seems to me that was the other end of the spectrum. It went back to kind of the 90s or the 80s idea, which was just anything goes to be shocking, and violence against women is perfectly okay, but in a much nastier way, I think, than the Friday the 13th movies, or the 80s were kind of cartoonish and fun. Like this is real visceral hate, and I don't know if it was hate for women or if they just thought that this was
I often think it's less about. I mean,
men get killed too in these.
I can't defend. There is misogyny, of course, but I think that we were identifying with suffering because we were suffering more. We were a little bit closer to that pain.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the catharsis is about witnessing other people going through it, but I think you can connect more to it when you're in a less happy place mentally.
Yeah.
And
But has that led us to this place where everybody's being offended now? Because nobody was offended, and now...
Look, I think it's a couple of things that have led to this, and I don't really think it has to do with the horror genre. For me,
Well, comedy too. I'm throwing comedy out there because anything went in that decade.
I think for me, two things really sort of rocked, and I'm thinking here North American, not sort of Eurocentric here. Well, maybe Eurocentric. But obviously 9/11 changed a lot of things for North America.
Yeah.
Like, this is the second time that America had been attacked on their native soil. The first time was Pearl Harbor, and even that was sort of away from the giant landmass that is North America, where 9/11, that was the Twin Towers. That really created a huge sense of paranoia.
And it's almost dismissive to just say America, because I think we felt it in Canada too.
Yeah.
I remember...
I was in Australia at the time, and...
No.
The culture went through a period of mourning, and shock.
Yeah.
Like just generally. You could tell, you could feel it and taste it in the air. Something terrible had happened, and things were changing for the worse.
Yeah. Here's something that we saw on live television, even though, like, in the 70s, they saw real live death and human bodies being carried home. I still remember to this day the images of people jumping from that burning building, and we're actually seeing them die on live television. And there was something that we couldn't go back from.
No.
You can still go on YouTube and see these sequences of people making that decision. Am I going to burn to death, or am I just going to fall to my death and have like a second of whatever before I go into the great abyss?
Yeah.
And there was something where the innocence was off.
Yeah.
A similar thing happened with the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Because horror movies were kind of overdressed period pieces, the big Edgar Allan Poe adaptations that Roger Corman were doing and things like that. And then as they got deeper into the Vietnam War, things started getting pretty fucking dark.
Yeah.
The Hills Have Eyes, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, all of the artifice was starting to be stripped away, and like, this is horror, you guys.
Yeah.
This is horror.
Yeah.
They were outside of the mainstream, and I feel like now this became the mainstream in the, I call them the 2000s.
Yeah, but a lot of these movies weren't funded and released by major studios as well, so...
And it was less about the embracing of the dark subject matter as the fact that the movies were making money, so let's make more of them.
Yeah, I guess.
But the other
that's what it comes down to.
But the other thing that really, I think, shocked people, and I think horror did tap onto this, and it did happen later in the decade, was the 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah.
And that was also, and it was scaffolded from the 9/11. I mean, Osama bin Laden got what he wanted.
He did everything he said he was going to do.
He wanted America to go so hugely in debt, hunting him down, and he accomplished that tenfold. So those two things really put the end to the American empire.
So it got harder to enjoy the wink, wink, nudge, nudge comedy of the sort of accented horror movies, because death wasn't funny, and even making it meta, a death should never be a punchline all of a sudden.
Yes.
That was just a change. I don't mind movies that wink. I don't mind horror movies that have a sense of humor. In fact, I'm quite for them. But I also appreciate a horror movie that takes itself seriously, and that's what started to happen in the noughties.
Yep.
Horror movies started taking themselves seriously again. And sort of like I said to you when I was talking about the Blair Witch Project, where it had been a while, where the population had seen a genuinely frightening movie, that started to happen, and people were showing up for it.
Yep.
So it turns out that this was one of the hardest ranks that we've done decade by decade. I would have thought...
This was difficult, yes.
I would have thought that...
There's so much material out there. You're going to mention movies that I haven't seen.
Probably.
I just know... and there are some that I mean, I went to a lot of trouble to track down some movies that I just missed in theaters. Now we're in a world where it's very difficult to get certain DVDs or even streaming options, and so
we've all talked about this, that there's going to be at least 1 or 2 selections on our list where we're going to go, ooh, I'm an idiot and I missed this.
I could have done a top 100.
Yep. Without
I think so. I think
we did a top 30. I could have comfortably done a top 100.
Yeah.
I thought
I'd feel comfortable, even though we'd be here for 2 weeks. But
when I was doing the 80s, I thought this will be the toughest list. And no, I think that the Naughties has been the toughest top 30 that I've ever had to do. And that is a compliment to the decade, by the way.
Yeah. Yes.
Full disclosure, as we do our list, I think, because you two are horror movie aficionados.
Okay, we're not the horror movie
you aren't. Yeah, I'm not. It's not John Carpenter and Wes Craven here, but I'm just saying, you know your stuff.
Yeah. And
beyond just like what the Hollywood system will pump out week after week. I really, really like horror movies, but I'm challenged being on this podcast to broaden my tastes a little bit more.
Okay.
My weaknesses are, I would say, like a creature feature like Tremors, where I get a lot of entertainment out of it. I get some laughs, but I'm not all that frightened by it.
Right.
And that's why I didn't even consider it. And I felt so horrible because it was such a personal film for you. But I was just so shocked.
Well,
but then I heard, like, again, there are more people on your side of the Tremors argument.
I realize that I like it more than anyone else, but again...
But I like some of the sequels. We've talked about Tremors movies. I went back and watched all the Tremors movies to prepare for Tremors...
6 or whatever it was.
Yeah, 6, the one in Africa or whatever. And I actually was surprised how much I enjoyed even some of the like straight-to-video.
Well,
but that's a weakness. The other one is horror comedy. Because I just find... it's not horrific enough. I think it leans too much on the comedy. So there's a very, very important movie on this list that I didn't leave it out. It's on there, but it's not as high as I initially thought it would be.
I think you're worrying over nothing.
Yeah.
Let's bring it back to the Naughties.
Yes. Naughties.
Everybody here in this room picked 2 movies to review. Yep. So what I would like to do is just pass it to each of you. I want you to say the movies you picked and why. Okay. Mr. Beckmann.
Well, I chose Jeepers Creepers, mostly because I do think it created a monster that is part of this decade that should be mentioned the same as the Universal monsters and even of the same ilk as Freddy vs. Jason. The film also has a lot of loving nods to other past suspense and horror films. But also, I do think the creator himself, writer-director Victor Salva, is a very interesting man. And I do think he is exercising some of his own personal demons in this movie.
Well, your love is deep for this movie.
Yeah.
Like, I remember you talking about it all the time when it first came out.
Yeah.
You've been on the Terror Table podcast talking about it.
Yeah.
And when given carte blanche, basically, to pick a movie from the Naughties, you wanted to talk about it again. So your love is real for Jeepers Creepers.
Yeah, I understand why they're like, meh, because it's got its problems. But it's fascinating enough that leaving it off this list, I think, would be a slight tragedy. So there, Jeepers Creepers 1. I don't want to talk about it too much because we will talk about it openly. But that is one. And the other one is, I think any list that doesn't have a Sam Raimi movie, a horror movie list that doesn't have a Sam Raimi on its list is missing something. And I'm going to come out and say this. I think Drag Me to Hell is a far scarier film than Evil Dead 2. I didn't say better. I just said scarier.
Okay.
I think it brings the goods. I can't believe it's PG-13. That's something else I will talk about. But Drag Me to Hell is Sam Raimi back in his backyard, and I think we should celebrate that.
It would have been probably R in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just things kind of changed with the rating system in the...
To be continued on that discussion.
Yeah.
For sure. Jason.
Yeah, so I wanted, because I am a little bit of a sucker for the small, condensed, little horror movie that could. Bill Paxton's Frailty is why I chose that. It was one of these, I think it was a spring release. It didn't get a whole lot of attention. I'm not sure it has much of a legacy. Frailty just did not get the attention, and it isn't mentioned as much, and I wanted to highlight a movie that was in that decade and isn't thought of as the most obvious horror movies.
Certainly doesn't bubble to the top of your mind right away. Yeah.
And the other thing is just the late great Bill Paxton. I wanted to honor him, and he was a hell of a director, and I'm not sure he directed that much.
No.
And I saw the possibility in that. I watched it again last night, and there's just so many details and so much stuff he did. It wasn't just I'm a star and I'm going to get my production crew to do everything.
Yeah.
There's a real style to it that's something else. And then the other one was just because it's so out there, so controversial. Lars von Trier's Antichrist, which again, revisiting it hasn't lost any of its shock.
It's definitely provocative.
It's provocative. I think we're going to have quite a conversation about it.
If nothing else, it is provocative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and I picked two very left field selections.
Yes, you
I wanted, like, full confession, like I said, only one of the movies we're going to review actually made my list. But I wanted to talk about the movie Constantine, because I think, like there's a lot of hate thrown at Constantine. Like, it's got a really hated reputation. And I think there's a lot worse movies than Constantine. And I also think it's fairly emblematic of what a lot of horror movies looked and felt like in the early aughts, which is what we're here to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other one is the Mothman Prophecies, which I felt like for the longest time I was the only person that liked it, but and I was looking around, there is sort of a little bit of a cult crowd starting to form around it these days.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a movie about mystery. And it's counterintuitive. It's a horror movie starring Richard Gere, which you don't run into very often.
Yeah.
And I get it. I understand, again, much like Constantine, why a lot of people found it impenetrable. But I think there's an interesting conversation to be had, and I wanted to have it. So here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, no, hallelujah, brother.
So, here we are to discuss the top 30 horror movies of the noughties.
Yeah.
Lee Beckmann, what ranked in 30th position and why?
So, for the first time in Rank and Review history that I've ever been on the show, I've done a tie. And this is also a guilty pleasure, so you can take out the forks and knives if you wish. But at number 30, I do have a tie, and that is number 1 is Frankenfish. Frankenfish is a silly monster movie, but it also plays with the monster movie slasher conventions when it comes to its red shirts. People that we think, like our lead character that was going to survive, does not. It's also
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers. It's also from the director of the Spawn movie, which is terrible, and it does suffer from CGI fish. It's also mercifully short, but I found it incredibly fun. I think it's a better movie than Beneath, which I also love. It's silly. Whenever I see it, I have a great time with it. It's dumb, but also considering how good the movies are on it, I couldn't do it. It would just, I love this movie so much. So I have the monster movie Frankenfish along with the dark comedy Black Sheep. This movie is ridiculous, but it gave me something that I didn't know I always wanted, and that was sheep fucking.
Zombie sheep.
Zombie sheep fucking.
Have you seen Black Sheep or?
I have seen neither of these movies, so that's what I was afraid of.
They're both incredibly stupid. But
I've heard of one, but I haven't heard of the other.
Amazingly, a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm just gonna start right down at movie list.
Well, here's the thing. What Lee's talking about here are two movies that have low budgets but big hearts.
Yeah.
I think because Weta got involved with Black Sheep, the effects are considerably better in Black Sheep.
Yeah.
But it is as ridiculous as it sounds. It's Zombie Sheep. Neither of those movies touched my list, but I have a great affection for both of them. I get it as your guilty pleasure picks, absolutely.
Yeah.
I like them fine, and I like them because they do a lot with a little.
Yes.
And it's there's only a certain personality who would deign put such a movie in their machine. Yeah, Frankenfish, that looks like something I need to see.
That'll be me soon. I'll be putting it in.
Black Sheep is punctuated. One of a major plot point is based off of a sheep farting.
Yeah, like.
We talked about that. I don't always go for that, but we'll see.
It's so crazy and over the top that it demands attention. So
Yeah.
I respect the decision.
Yeah.
Well, it's fun, right?
Both of them are fun.
You've gone to the movies. You've had a good time.
Yeah,
I mean,
and they're also short. Like they don't stay
80 minutes.
80 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I lovingly give Frankenfish Black Sheep number 30.
Where can I find this? Because that's what I'm struggling with. That's what I struggled with.
Amazon.
Some movies. Yeah.
Amazon.
You can borrow them from me anytime you like.
Yeah, that's right. You have everything. So.
Yeah.
What was your
So
last...
I'm afraid that my list is going to seem very mainstream.
Okay.
But just based on this first selection, but maybe I'm wrong. My first one is kind of a behind the scenes old Hollywood idea. Well, not really Hollywood, but German filmmaking. Shadow of the Vampire, featuring one of the great performances of the 2000s. What are you calling it? The naughties?
I call it the naughties. But
Yeah, 2000s, The Naughties by William Dafoe. He's playing this actor, Max Schreck, who is apparently a deep method actor, but many people believe in the filming of Nosferatu that an actual vampire was hired to play this role, and the whole film plays into that. It has its problems. I mean, Malkovich, I think, is just a notch over the top.
Right.
He's playing the director, Monod.
the movie's just full of great acting.
It's just terrific acting, a lot of atmosphere. The climax is horrifying when you realize, okay, we have this vampire monster here, but the true monster in this film is the director who will do anything to get his vision. So I just think it's a solid film. It was difficult to get a hold of, and I rewatched it recently. But it's not scary. So that's why it's
really
far back.
interesting. It's really interesting, but it didn't quite make my list for that reason.
Yeah.
I found it more interesting than scary.
Yeah.
I was more lost in the acting and the performances and the execution than I was taken away by the spell that the story was casting. I like it a lot. I have no problem with it being on your list. Respect.
Yeah, same with me. Nothing but respect. I think it's a beautiful movie to look at. I love the opening credits. I love the score. The actors are great.
The makeup's outstanding.
I sort of put it in that sort of subgenre of movies about making movies, a la the Player and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I totally understand why it's here. I mean, it's taking on the Nosferatu tale. Once again, the list was so hard. I thought about it, but it didn't make my list.
And points to Nicolas Cage, who was a producer.
That's right.
And I think originally he wanted to play the character that Willem Dafoe did, but when he saw Willem Dafoe and pictured in his head what the movie could be with him, he thought that was the right call for the movie.
Well, and that's a good decision because he doesn't always make the right decisions.
I think it would be funnier with Nick Cage.
And it is actually a darkly comedic film. I mean,
but it doesn't quite let you get comfortable.
No,
you can smile, but you can't quite laugh.
Yeah.
And this is the role that actually got him the Green Goblin role in Spider-Man. And honestly, I really think they should have just stayed with makeup instead of the whole costume. But I digress. We're getting way off topic.
Yeah.
So usually I will put my guilty pleasure at the very bottom of the list, but instead it's going to be in my 29th position because my obsessive compulsive disorder had me put David Slade's 30 Days of Night in last place from 2007. I'm not a big vampire guy, generally speaking, but this movie has teeth. It does. Like, the concept is sound. It's arguably anticlimactic, but very faithful to the original graphic novels, which I have read. Stylistically very strong, so much so that it absolutely breaks my heart that the director went on to work on the Twilight franchise. But I really think by itself, as like an isolated popcorn horror movie, 30 Days of Night gets the job done. So there it is in 30th position.
Once again, nothing but respect. I didn't put it on the list because, once again, so many great horror movies, but I dig to live in Bukes out of 30 Days of Night. It was
on my shout-out list. It was on my runner-up.
But you've seen this one at least.
Yes, I have seen it. Yes.
Yeah.
And there isn't a lot wrong with it. I just found 30 movies that I just subjectively thought were better. But it's tough. I mean, it really does belong on one of our lists, so I'm glad it's been mentioned.
There it is.
Yeah.
Mr. Beckmann, what's your 29th ranking movie?
So this is when it gets a little controversial. I chose this pick for numerous reasons. One, I had to do a sort of shout out to the torture porn genre that really got celebrated during this decade. But I also chose this movie because I do think it gives one of the greatest horror villains of this decade, and it doesn't get as much shout out, and that is writer-director's Tom Six, The Human Centipede.
Wow.
I totally understand why people hate this movie. I get it. This movie goes it wallows down at the bottom of the barrel. But I got to give a special shout out to Dieter Laser, who plays Dr. Heiter. I'm sure I'm saying this wrong. The second we see him on screen, it follows the familiar trajectory of like two good-looking young women who get lost in a European country, and they get lost in the woods, and they find, like Hansel and Gretel, they find this sort of dead tech 90s style house, and they meet up with Dieter, and right away, even the viewer kind of knows, oh, this person is not all quite right in the head. He just has this presence about him that is utterly terrifying. And the movie really works for the first 45 minutes on this sense of dread. We know something is not right. We know that we're going to come up to the actual human centipede, but it's all build up. And there's some real skill here. And here's the other thing, when we actually get to the human centipede part, we get the doctor explaining what the operation is going to be, and it's all oral. Like we never see the operation. And when we get to the actors, actually in the human centipede, it's all them. Like there's actually not a lot of gore in this movie. It's all the actors selling the human centipede itself. It's like, and it's just their performances. And so I kind of walked out of this movie kind of like the same way with The Hills Have Eyes, where it's a mean-spirited movie, but there's a moral redemption aspect to it, and it's all the actors. It doesn't really go cheap with the gore. We see it. It's all oral. It's all
we don't
oral
need a full review.
Yeah,
but
it's
I
all
get what you're saying.
stereotyping.
When
Human
you-
centipede.
when
Human
you-
centipede.
And I'm kicking myself that I didn't track it down yet, so I won't
I
go back and
fucking
forth.
hate it. I hate that.
Is it
movie.
okay?
Like,
Yeah,
I
it's
can't
had
believe
an
it's on your
influence,
list.
but people
Yeah.
told me not to see it. No, people don't realize
get
that I
it.
do
Yeah.
watch those.
There's plenty of like torture porn movies that I could say, yeah, sure, give a guilty pleasure. Hostel was influential, if nothing else, or there's lots to choose from.
Yeah.
Of all the ones to choose, I like that would be at the very bottom of my list.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, like. When you go to see a movie called Hostel, you're paying your money to watch these people get strapped to a chair and tortured.
Yeah.
And that's one thing.
Yeah.
When you pay to see Human Centipede, what gets you there is the idea of people being sewn ass to mouth.
Yep.
It's not for me. I don't give a shit about that movie.
Yep.
I struggled through it because you said it had some redeeming qualities.
Yep.
And I think the only reason that movie exists is the tease of the shock. And I'm sure people will either be disappointed because it wasn't shocking enough or because it was too shocking. But either way, I see no value in it personally.
That's
So-
fine. For me, I sort of see Dieter as the same sort of family as the Angus Scrim Tallman. I thought he's a great horror villain. I totally understand why people hate this movie. I get why you don't like this movie, but it made an enough effect on me that I couldn't leave it off the list.
And keep listening, because I have some mean-spirited movies on my list. It's not that it's so dour and awful necessarily. It's just it's one of those movies that people use to beat up the horror genre.
Yeah.
And it's one of those movies that I have a hard time defending.
Yeah.
And I can defend some pretty fucked up movies.
Yeah, I'm disappointed that this is the well that he keeps going back to. I kind of see when I first saw it, I thought Tom Six could be the next Dutch madman like Paul Verhoeven, and sadly he's stayed in this well.
I'm just gonna up the stakes.
Yeah,
every movie.
yeah, and it's disappointing, but
Yeah.
like I said,
Right.
29.
It's
Agree to
got that
disagree.
kind of midnight movie.
It's a
Take
dare
your
movie.
girlfriend to horrify her.
but as I said,
But there's a lot. I'm gonna watch it and then
You'll
I'll
do
just send you my opinion.
I get, but you're not wrong.
Yeah.
Because I'm going
Like,
to be
that's
either on
the
his
thing.
side or I'm going to be on your
Well,
side,
no, like
Larry.
here's the thing. Like I get why he hates it. I'm not blind to the fact
no,
that
no.
most
Yeah.
people really. So like I
But-
get it. I'm not blind.
Solid pick,
Not
solid pick.
blind.
And it's influential. I mean, it is a very influential.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for mentioning all of these movies, we might as well mention it. We're on to number 29 for me. So we've talked about Stephen King.
Yeah.
I love Stephen King's literature. I like most of his movies. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. What was interesting about this particular decade is the big It. Well, we're back to remakes of It and Pet Sematary, but the big novels that he was known for had already been made into movies. So these were kind of novellas or short stories. And first one I want to mention is The Mist, directed by Frank Darabont. And it's funny how there's a couple of them I see, and then I forget some details, and I go back, and I'm like, this is just a really, really great film.
Yeah.
I like the setting. I like this kind of lake community grocery store. It feels very authentic. The characters in there. It goes into some really dramatic territory. Marcia Gay Harden,
She kills it.
She's going for the moon, the stars, and the sun in this performance.
She kills it.
She
I
kills it. There's a couple of people that I can't believe didn't even get recognition, but yeah.
Yeah, and then the end, like you think it's just the most devastating end. Sometimes King stuff will end kind of hopeful in some strange way after all these horrible things have happened.
Yeah.
It's a devastating end. I couldn't recommend it higher, other than the fact that I'm not sure it's all that scary.
Okay.
And with that being the criteria, movies jumped over it on my list because it's not as scary as some. It's
my only
gory.
problem with the selection is how low it is on the list.
Yeah.
That's my only.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And it's like
I'm
Blair
not the
Witch.
same.
I know
I'm
it
not the
is.
same.
I know it belongs, but I
To
don't know.
me,
It
The
was
Mist
tough.
has always been the dark shadow to sort of counterbalance the light of Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
Shawshank Redemption is all about hope, and Mist is all about giving in to despair, and they're almost equal in at least that measure. So I have nothing but love for The Mist. It will come up again.
Oh, it will be mentioned again. Like I said,
Do you like the creatures in it?
I
do.
love it.
Yeah.
I love everything about that
Yeah.
movie.
Good.
You will be hearing from it again on my list.
I've mentioned it before in the podcast. I have the director's special edition where you can watch it in black and white.
Oh,
And it's
I would love to see
so
that.
much better. in
Oh, I'd
black
love
and
to
white.
see that.
This, because the creatures don't stand out as much.
Okay.
And the B movie aesthetic is both simultaneously embraced, but it also seems somehow grittier in black and white too. So
That would be amazing.
It's like you get to have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
If you get a chance to watch it in black and white, that's my preferred way to watch The Mist.
I nod my head of approval.
Yeah.
Maybe it would be higher if I had seen that version of it. So
Right. So my 29th pick is where my guilty pleasure showed up. From 2001 and Stuart Gordon. I give you Dagon.
Yay!
It's an adaptation of the H.P. Lovecraft story, Innismouth. What is it? Escape from Innismouth, or Shadows over Innismouth.
Yeah.
And this guy's on a vacation, and they get a bad storm, and he has to take shelter in this fishing village. And everything about this fishing village is wrong right away. It's got a huge Night of the Living Dead vibe. Because it's Stuart Gordon, he's working incredibly low budget. So you have to put up with some really not good CGI at times. Like, really not good CGI at times. Like, what is this doing on the list? Bad CGI at times. But counterbalance to that, it has some of the craziest practical, physical effects that I've seen this side of Romero's Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
And they're telling a Lovecraft story pretty well. It's crazy. It's like it's in your face, and it's one of those Gallagher Seats movies where the level of gore is like a certain audience will just say when at some point, right?
Yeah.
But I love that Stuart Gordon is so willing to show you shit you haven't seen before, and he does it again here. It's not an amazing movie, but I have a lot of love for it. So
You
there
will
it
see
is.
no judgment here, and I'm nodding my head in approval. Not on my list, but once again, totally understand.
Have you seen Dagon?
I have written it down to see him.
Dagon's good.
I feel like this is gonna be the thing.
There's one scene in particular. I'm like, damn, son.
How can we make sure that Jason doesn't go off rails? Let's find the most obscure ones. Some of them are not all that obscure, but
Well, Stuart Gordon.
because I've heard you talk about it on
Stuart
on
Gordon's
the
awesome.
previous
Well,
show.
he did The Reanimator, and he's done some fairly popular movies, so he's been around. Robot Jocks? Anybody? A Robot Jocks?
I saw it back in the day and remember nothing of it.
Remember? Yeah.
Anyway,
I used to think I could remember
Wasn't
every
that the
detail
film
of
that
every
eventually
movie.
broke
on the
full
right
moon
night,
studio?
dude, and in the right mood, I think Dagon's the thing. But you have to set your mind a little bit on stupid. Just all I'm asking.
Yeah. Wasn't that the
I'll
movie
be
that
fine.
officially wrecked the Full Moon Studio? Robot Jocks?
Robot Jocks bankrupt them. I think.
Yeah. Gotta love it.
Anyway, that was my 29. Mr. Beckmann, what's your 28?
Well, once again, controversially, and we are going to talk about this movie, and it originally wasn't on my list, but then I saw it again, and I understood, I think, what he was going for, but once again, it's open to interpretation, and that is Lars von Trier's Antichrist. I think it's actually radically feminist. I think it is a episode made by a mentally ill person who is suffering from bipolarism, who is wrestling with the patriarchy of religion. Once again, I totally understand why you hate this movie.
Hate's a strong word.
Okay, you don't like this
But
movie, and
that's
I also
We've never talked about it.
we will talk about this. It stayed with me. I think it's a aesthetically beautiful movie to look at. There, as a person who likes to study paintings and knows exactly where some of these shots come from, it's always that, hey, that's really cool. It is not easy. It's
Beautiful, horrible movie.
It's a beautiful horror and horrible movie.
Yeah.
So I couldn't leave it off the list. I think it's powerful enough. So at number 28, I have the very debatable, very talked about Antichrist.
Yeah.
Well, obviously you chose it.
Yeah,
so-
yeah, and you'll be hearing a lot from me on this one later on, and when we review it. But I'm totally with Lee. It's on my list, and
It's not on my list. I agree that at times there's beautiful stuff in it, and I have such respect for actors who are willing to commit body and soul to a role. So there's a lot to respect here. But if you ask me, did I enjoy my time with Antichrist?
You're not
But
supposed
you're not
to.
supposed to. No, you're
You're not
supposed to.
supposed to.
It's
You're
the
supposed
same
to
way
think.
as you would say, did you enjoy your time with Requiem for a Dream or something like that?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. But whereas I saw more value personally in Requiem for a Dream and what they were trying to do with it. And I have a very personal problem with Lars von Trier. Like, part of this is me, and I will cop to that. I
Yeah.
do not like Lars von Trier the person.
Yeah.
And that sometimes bleeds into his work.
Yeah.
Well, let's say that.
yeah.
Let's say that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there'll
yeah,
be a lot
yeah.
to talk about.
Yeah.
Because there's other filmmakers I could bring up who are horrible human beings, and we
Watch
put
it,
their
watch
films like I think you both had The Shining way up there, and for the
Kubrick
80s
is a
show.
bastard, yeah.
Yeah.
But I love him. He's one of the greatest filmmakers of all time.
Yeah.
He's a bastard.
Anyways.
I heard a sound, the cry of all the things that aren't done.
That's what fear is. Your thoughts distort reality.
You have to have the courage to stay in the situation that frightens you.
She loves me. I can't do this. The ground is burning.
The ground is not burning.
Nature is Satan's church.
Do you know what you're saying?
You shouldn't underestimate evil.
Tell me what you think is supposed to happen in the woods.
Where are you? I should not come here. Get out!
So Lars von Trier is a provocateur in that, like, he likes to make shit that pisses people off and that amuses him. He gets off on it. And as a person, I mean, I don't know him. I have not met the guy, but I've heard enough bad shit come out of his mouth that I just don't like him. And he kind of reminds me of this sort of the Todd Solondz, Larry Clark school of filmmaker, where every time you make a movie, it's going to push a nerve. It's going to be super shitty about some aspect, or otherwise either he's pushing a nerve or he's just bathing in the suffrage of women, which by his own admission he finds enjoyable. He enjoys women suffering. That's entertaining. His words. So,
How does he get the women that he gets to be in
Yeah.
his films?
well, he's a very respected artiste. And I think he's more of an artiste than he is a filmmaker, personally. Okay? I said that I think that there's some amazing visual achievement in a lot of his films, and The Antichrist is no exception. And the full body and soul commitment of Charlotte Gainsbourg and Willem Dafoe deserves a lot of respect. But it's all in the service of a guy who thinks it's a joke on his own audience, by his own words. And I can't respect that. I can't respect that he thinks he's pulling one over on us. I don't think that's a fair reason to dislike the movie, because I don't like the film's creator. So upon watching this for the first time, this wasn't me revisiting it. I, after Dogville, just decided I was done with Lars von Trier. I hadn't liked any fucking thing he'd done since Breaking the Waves, and I had this sinking feeling like after if I watched Breaking the Waves again, that it would just become about the suffering of the character. Instead of me thinking, oh, what a strong performance, she really went there emotionally, all I'll picture is Lars von Trier behind the camera with an erection. Okay, so that's gonna hurt it for me, right? He has done stuff more interesting in his far past when he did TV in Denmark, that Kingdom miniseries and stuff like that, The Haunted Hospital. What an ideal setting for a ghost story, a hospital, you know? There's just seemed full of potential, and there's stuff in his background that's not without interest. But generally speaking, the theme of his work is women suffering and sort of art portrait shots. Like it's film, but he has these almost still canvas portraits that he will measure in on and make you kind of drink it in. There's a few shots of the nature, particularly when we get into Eden in Antichrist, where it says, look at this for a few seconds.
Nature is Satan's church.
And then we go moving on forward.
That was an important idea.
Exactly. The story has to do with a couple who's lost their baby. Was it an act of just a mistake or an act of neglect? It's hard to say. They're having a fairly passionate love scene. The baby is not being watched. The baby crawls to a window. The baby falls out the window in brutal, agonizing black and white slow motion. And then the woman, we never get any names in this.
They're just
he and she.
They're just the pronouns of he and she.
Which, by the way, is always a flag right away for me.
Is
if
it?
you have a movie where they don't bother to give characters names, if we're just dealing with he and she, flag.
Would you have been mad if it had been Adam and Eve?
Well, at least it would have been more directly on point. But I mean, I guess that would have made even more sense because, like, they've been so on the nose about everything else. Why not just call them Adam and Eve?
Sure.
But Willem Dafoe is going to help his wife through this grief by basically psychologically and physically torturing her. She is then going to avenge that psychological and physical torture by, well, returning the favor. Including attaching a legit millstone to him, which I thought was something out of way fucking left field.
Well, after
we have genital mutilation. We have lots of these crazy images of nature. The deer running around with this stillborn calf half hanging out. And that weird fucking fox thing that sort of speaks.
Yeah,
Chaos reigns. Yes.
Chaos reigns. Yeah.
It's a jumble of awful images, strange perversion, confusion, aggression, and uncomfortableness. And that's the movie. I mean, there's stuff to talk about. You could say, like, well, I mean, that's what the movie is, uncomfortable and beautiful, and it goes on for 2 hours. And that kind of is like what the experience of the movie is. What you get out of it is what you kind of get out of it, I think. For me, the uncomfortable kind of trumped anything else. Is there an intellectual layer to be explored? Probably, yeah. There's some ideas. Is there some interesting ideas about gender politics? Yes. And I think for me, the most compelling thing that I could lock into and think, like, help me make sense of the movie is the Antichrist, the perversion of nature, this reversing the idea that nature is good inherently and is there for us and loves us back. This is the idea of nature where none of that is true and closer to
and that women are nature, because there's this line in there that she says, our bodies are not our own. Our bodies belong to nature. And then this suggestion nature is Satan's playground. And I think a lot of it is about...
is some of the muddiest shit in the movie for me personally.
I can understand how people would see it either as hugely misogynist or the opposite.
Opposite is a feminist film.
Here's
he himself.
Okay, but here we go. Yeah,
here's a few Lars von Trier's quotes, just from the guy. Some of them having to do with this movie, but some of them just generally. He grew up. He chose Catholicism as his chosen faith, mainly to piss off all the Protestants that lived around him. Okay. He considered Antichrist a fun way to work through some of the darker aspects of his own personal depression. The movie never fails to make me smile. He's often visibly drunk and stoned on set, and self-admitted, and has been reported by cast members. Bjork said that she would never do another movie again after working with him. Nicole Kidman had to reassess what she was willing to tolerate after working with him. He does have a history of getting a little bit handsy, or if not handsy, very aggressive and angry and not quite physical, but shitty, particularly to his female cast members. And, that's to speak nothing of the whole Hitler speech at the Cannes Film Festival.
Which Kirsten Dunst was so... she didn't know what to do. You watch her reaction in there, and later she bashed him in interviews.
He says a film shouldn't be entertaining. A film should be a rock in your shoe. He also says he's the greatest filmmaker in the world. And I think even if it was true, if you claim yourself the greatest filmmaker in the world, you're a shithead for saying it.
Yeah.
So we were talking about Jeepers Creepers. Should this bleed into the movie? Should it make me like the movie less? Probably not. Does it? Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I like it less because I hate the guy who made it. And maybe that's unfair, but I'm going to be honest with you and say that that is true. Okay. And that's a not very good starting point to have in a movie, but that's where I was as I sat down to watch Antichrist.
Yeah.
I respect the actors, I respect some of the visual components, and most of the rest of the stuff I thought I would either dismiss as interesting or I would dismiss as, oh, I'm supposed to be really shocked or angry right now, aren't I, Lars? Fuck yourself.
Yeah.
And that's the war that I have while watching the movie. I don't hate it the way I expected that, frankly, I was going to hate it, but nor does it make me want to change my mind and suddenly go watch Nymphomaniac and The House that Jack built. Like, I just don't fucking care anymore.
Yeah.
Like, there's enough great filmmakers out there who are telling stories that actually mean to be a story and mean to entertain. So I'll watch those movies. I'm done with this. So I'm sorry I've overtaken. I spent the first 8 minutes of the review just justifying my position.
It's fine.
But there it is. I'm not a huge fan of Antichrist, though I respect elements of it. It's just not for me.
Yeah. I had a lot of connections to this movie, especially as it played along. And one thing I guess I felt great power from, or at least a connectivity or a scaffolding to, is finding about the making of this movie. He was all set to go to make this movie a year in advance before he actually shot it. And he suffered from a huge bout of his, bipolarism. And he had to, like, Eva Green was supposed to play, like, the original Charlotte Gainsborough character. And since I come from a family that where mental illness is very much an issue, especially when it comes to depression, and even I have to watch myself, once in a while, I definitely understood the whole feeling how your body betrays you, how nature betrays you. And
the best case scenario is that nature gives you everything and then takes it away.
Yeah. So I could totally identify with Von Trier and his exploration of that, about how we can think nature is a very beautiful thing, but it could also be very much like Satan's church. And having an illness like that and wanting to get better, like, that's something else that clearly I felt kind of struggling through this movie, especially when the Gainsborough character, she has an epiphany, and for a brief moment is happiness, and Willem Dafoe just doesn't trust it.
No.
Having that feeling of this, you so want to get better, but you can't because you're so sad, and not understanding it. I deeply felt like that. I also understand, through his history, I think he's also very aware of his chauvinism. He actually hired a chauvinistic expert for this movie because that's one thing.
What a weird thing.
Yeah, it was a radical feminist and wanted to, and he definitely knows how patriarchal the Catholic faith is, how a lot of faith is, and how it's very much a destructive, repulsive thing for women.
I feel like neither person comes out a winner in this, but it's
here's the
the
thing.
age-old trope of men are monsters and women are monster food, and I'm over it. Does Willem Dafoe not mourn his child?
Okay,
he is so.
He
treats her as a project instead of dealing with his feelings. He now moves into, she's my patient. I'm going to spend full time making her my patient. She's not my wife. She's my patient. He breaks so many ethics codes by doing that.
Great. And if he was a character with a name, then we could get into that. But if he is man,
and of course Von Trier hates the psychiatric field. Like he's come out and said one of the reasons why I wanted to make this movie was just to tar and feather the psychiatric field. Right. Willem Dafoe, I think, is really the true monster in this movie. We get the sense that he's been psychologically torturing her even before the child incident happens. So when she does eventually lash out, I can honestly see a lot of women really cheering for her. Mm-hmm. She also is made to convince through her own religious teachings, that women. She thinks that women are inherently evil. She has that confession to him. She
says that,
about that, and that's just how much of the brainwashing she's just trying to at least process. Mm-hmm. So, this movie, Dafoe, at the very least, is doing a lot of, and I hate the term, mansplaining everything to her, and when his psychological torture has driven her to, and it's such a horrifying scene where she's pouring all the pills down the toilet. Mm-hmm. And she's looking back, sort of smiling. I literally gasped out to, no! What are you doing? They're this is no good is coming this, and you're evil for suggesting this.
Yeah.
So I think it is a giant feminist nightmare of a movie, and that's just
and
one of
them. And if I believed that Lars von Trier cared about feminism, I might back you up on that.
Okay.
But I think he's a provocateur, and he wants people to be shocked.
But is he...
Yes, I agree with you. I agree that's one of the angles, and I think one of the huge criticisms that I have for Von Trier is, you need to lighten up a little bit, obviously, but also choose a different avenue. If that's always what you're doing, that you're meant to be provocative.
The movie shouldn't be entertaining. It should be a rock in your shoe.
I think some of that element.
There's so many frivolous movies that come out, though.
Yeah,
and so that's the point. I think he's trying to make. He's making it in a very self-serving and arrogant
this
way.
Grotesque showmanship,
there is,
element to it. So whether he truly believes in himself to be the greatest filmmaker in the world.
No, I think that I doubt he does, but he knows that a lot of people will be pissed off that he says it. And
he says
that's why he says it.
And that gets attention to his movies.
I
Made
just don't respect that.
Outside of a studio system, and
it gets to be a little much after a while, and I freely
I think he sunk Melancholia with what he said at that press conference, because Melancholia, I know you haven't seen it. It's a fantastic film. It's one of Kirsten Dunst's best performances. But then people stayed away from it because
I haven't seen it, but
what he said
because of the press conference. It was like I said after Dogville. I can't even fully articulate how much I hated Dancer in the Dark.
Yeah.
I fucking
I like
despised
Dancer in the Dark.
I fucking hated it. Mm-hmm. And I'm a Bjork fan. It wasn't that I didn't like the music.
I like Bjork. I like the music.
I think that she's actually an emotional powerhouse, and it's too bad she quit making movies, because I bet you she's quite an actress. Mm-hmm. But again, that was one of his Women Suffer and He Gets Off on It movies, and I really didn't like it. And Dogville was somehow an even artier, fartier version of that, getting legitimized by serious, real actors, and it just I was just like, no, I mean, maybe there's a place for this kind of cinema, but this is not for me. I am done. Fuck you, Lars von Trier.
Yeah.
I did the same thing with Todd Solondz, and I did the same thing with Larry Clark.
And talented filmmakers.
Sure, but
and I
think they're more about pissing people off than they are about
You do need to grow.
storytelling filmmaker.
I fully admit, you
That's
do need
all
to,
you can do is
Yeah.
piss people off. That's kind of lame and easy.
I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
hear anything about the new film, and
I heard it's shocking, and there's two
Is it?
versions of it. It's really him talking about himself, or at least
Mm-hmm.
how the media perceives him in a lot of ways. I haven't seen it yet. I'm not going to rush to it. Look, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. Is that I don't see him as an amazing filmmaker. I do think he needs to
He's
grow.
an artist.
He's an artist.
And, like,
he
he's
can
got
create a great shot. I mean, the
bold
opening
ideas.
sequence of this movie, I mean, I would challenge you to find anything that looks more beautiful while we're watching a child jump out of a window. I mean, and a very graphic
sex scene.
sex scene.
While it's going on.
But there's so much important stuff happening in that sequence and I know you will not want to watch it ever again, but watching it again, the first three parts are
Yeah.
in there with those soldiers. Pain. What is it? Pain.
the three
grief,
beggars who we
and-
actually see at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we return to something that isn't shown later on, just before the genital mutilation. And I think there's this idea in here or suggestion that two ideas I have, and you can maybe throw in you're reading things into this movie. One of them is the idea that the little boy sees his parents having sex, and he chooses to jump out the window because he doesn't know what's happening. He can't reconcile that. That's maybe me stretching it. The other one is that she saw that he was getting up there and was in a dangerous situation, but she was so committed to having her orgasm that
Wouldn't she?
and then so
revisit it? She implies that.
and then
is that her perception, or is that the reality?
and then right after that she cuts off her clitoris.
Yeah.
So because she's ripping out the thing that basically killed her child, and all of the guilt that she has, blaming herself for the death of her.
But again,
her son.
My intro
to
to
this great
psychoanalysis, by that, she is so furious with all the physical and psychological torment that her husband has subjected her to.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, when she finally embraces what she believes to be her responsibility, she sexually mutilates herself. Does that not somehow vindicate his position? And here's the other thing, like the faceless crowd of women that pass by the evil man. Yes, man is evil and bad, as he is in every movie, especially in these art movies. They're in like period clothing and their faces are all soft. So like, does that mean he can't understand women? Is that falling back to the plight of women? And again, if I believed that Lars von Trier gave a shit about women, I could make a meal out of that. But it's completely counterfeit, right? Like, he doesn't believe that. Or if he does, he's closer in his heart to being on side with the Willem Dafoe character. And I'm just basing this on, again, the movies I've seen of his and words that have come out of the man's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
But is he saying that so that people will see the movie and then they'll be like totally screwed? Like he doesn't believe any of the stuff he's saying because he's trying to get this attention, and then you see it and you're
he
like
puts
mixed
those
up. Like,
ideas out
seems
there.
like there's a feminist message in here, but he says stuff which is so where do we actually sit?
It's the provocation. It's all about him.
Yeah.
After a point, like, the films are just the next film. As long as it's pissing people off, he's winning.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I took it that it was the faceless victims.
I agree. I agree that he needs to find a different tune.
Yeah,
I agree. But if you're going to be dealing with dark, horrific subjects like he is in Antichrist, I'm glad he was let off the reins.
He didn't pull punches. This is not as nothing is safe about this movie.
I've seen in any horror movie.
Yeah, I do think that this movie could not be made else by a person who is suffering from mental illness, such as bipolarism. This seems like the perfect movie that could come out of that kind of mind.
Right.
And I'm willing to at least sort of examine it, and whether he's full of baloney, great, fine. And I agree that he does need to find a different story.
And at this point, the whole role of the males as the abuser, like undimensioned evil piece of shit who has nothing to contribute but hate and wrong in the world, has been well enough explored. I would like to see some dimension, or some exploration of why, to go back to our old Chicago 10 argument.
Sure.
Okay, they're evil. Why are they evil? Why is he doing this? Maybe he doesn't attempt to answer that.
Okay.
Is Willem Dafoe's character truly evil, or is he avoiding feeling the grief of losing his son? That's
he's
the question I have.
Column A and column B combined, to be perfectly honest.
He jumps into his work like a lot of people do when men, I'm generalizing here.
Makes it about her.
Yeah.
And externalizes it. Women internalize, men externalize. Is it that simple?
Yeah.
Again, and just the broad strokes. The place that they go to get well is Eden, but it's so not.
Eden is no longer Eden anymore. The sin has happened.
Not
the world
subtle,
and nature is
visually well represented.
Satan is in charge.
Yep.
It has a huge impact on me, but it is not for everyone.
Yeah. I'm sorry to be the counterpoint on this.
No, it's
and
good,
again,
man.
much like I said with Jeepers Creepers, I don't know that my review of this is fair, but I would feel dishonest if I said anything, but there it is. What was your 28th, Mr. Cooper?
28th, and I have a feeling you two might be saying that this is, again, it should be higher on my list, but Canadian film Ginger Snaps, directed by John Fawcett.
You're fired.
I'm in trouble. No. I really like the premise here. I mean, I think you've talked about how werewolf movies
are a tough thing.
They're a tough thing. That this one works. I listened to, I don't know how long ago, this podcast where you were reviewing Ginger Snaps 2.
Right.
And I got the idea that it was better than the first one as a general analysis. I went to see it, and it didn't work for me as well. But
whose case is that it was better? I think, like, in a way, it's a little bit more of a professional movie maybe than the first Ginger Snaps. It's got a little bit more polish to it. But Ginger Snaps to me is, like I talked about before, it's a movie with a little budget but a huge heart. Mm-hmm. And like the metaphor of puberty and the werewolfism works perfectly. The fact that it was a girl instead of a guy was awesome.
That was great.
You know, the cast was awesome.
The sisters had such a great chemistry together from the very beginning of the film. I guess it was a strange issue with it because what I like in a movie is different than what everybody else in the world seems to like.
Right.
I liked all of the setup. The climax wasn't as interesting to me. I guess that's where it fell back a little bit. And I think one of the professional argument was that the creature doesn't look as impressive in that version as opposed to two. But I found the first one more compelling.
Much like Jaws, the movie's so good that the bad special effects you just want to forgive because you like the movie so much.
Yeah, and recognizing, I mean, it's just this great Canadian.
I'm guessing that Lee's going to have this on his list much higher than that.
Oh yes, I was about to say, shocker. This is not the last time that we're.
I don't think we're going to be.
Yes, Larry, you're correct. It's a lot higher.
Okay, fair enough. Is that good enough on Ginger Snaps? Okay, so in 28th position, I have Slither. From 2006 by James Gunn. I also want to put an honorable mention to Adam Green's Hatchet. It's another over-the-top kind of crazy, funny horror movie. But if I had to pick between those two, I think I personally prefer Slither. It borrows a lot from Night of the Creeps. It's got a real fun sense of like over-the-topness to it. It's almost an actual living cartoon. But the ick factor is really high.
High ick factor.
Michael Rooker is really killing it, buried under layers of makeup. Nathan Fillion is always a likable presence.
Yeah.
The special effects are crazy and over the top,
Yeah.
and I just have a big smile on my face while I'm watching Slither.
The
so
cow,
here it sits.
man. The cow scene. Sorry.
No, that's my choice.
No, I applaud the choice. It hurts me so much to say this, but it's one of the honorable mentions.
Right.
It was one of those, I can't believe it, because it was on the list up until like last week.
It's pretty funny. It's
Yeah.
kind of a funny movie too,
Yeah.
so I get it.
And that's my problem. Is that I saw it. It's too much comedy and not horrific enough. I know it has the ick factor in there, and there's enough to like about it. I like it, but I don't love it, and I know I'm in the minority on this one.
Well, this is the guy who brought up Super.
And yeah, I know that's what I'm saying. I like James Gunn. I mean, and Super really overperformed for me when we did that show, but.
Yeah,
Like I said earlier, man, I looked at my honorable mentions and I shook my head going, I can't believe I'm doing this. I love Slither. I love it.
It's, you know what it really is? It's the family fun sequence. It's when that entire family gets wiped out by those like worm creatures.
Yeah.
And it's just like, this was a pretty fun, bouncy quality. It almost has like a Frighteners type of crazy, like, here's a really goofy scene from a Disney movie. Now here's a fucking traumatizing scene from a horror movie.
Yeah.
And we're just gonna bounce back and forth.
For me, it's the Michael Rooker when he impregnates that like woman he takes home.
Yeah.
I'm just like, like
It's, you can't unsee Slither.
yeah,
so
you
here
can't.
it is.
Really,
No, I haven't unseen it. That's
like,
true.
once
but-
again, I'm nodding my head in approval, and I can't believe it. But well, here's the one that I think is probably the most left field of it all, believe it or not. But considering I think where we are right now, and then this is more in the States than I would say here, but how polarized we are. But I do think that this is a horror and an evil that needs to be addressed more in the public zeitgeist. And here's a documentary talking about it. At number 27, I have Jesus Camp.
Oh, cool.
Jesus Camp is a terrifying, terrifying documentary about radical right religion and how they materialize and brainwash young children into fighting for our Savior Lord. And this is what serial killers are bred from in a lot of ways.
Well, and it's the joy that they're taking out of it too.
Yeah.
They fucking love their job so much.
Like this church doesn't exist anymore. Apparently, it's stopped about 3-4 years, and they actually talked to one of the young boys later, and how he's like left the radical right religious world, and he's more about studying theology and different religions. And he talked about how scary this cult world is, but like even the numbers they have at the start of the movie, they said, like, was it 54% of America has evangelical Christianity running through it. This is I don't know, it made me just gobsmacked at the stuff I was seeing. I want to do a special mention to another horror documentary called Cropsy, which started out sort of examining the sort of urban legend of the character Cropsy, but turns into sort of crime procedural, but also talking about what happened with the Reagan years and the destruction of all the mental health facilities. It's not as good, but I it's one of those horror documentaries that I think people should go and see. But Jesus Camp you cannot take your eyes off it, and you even see it again, my jaw dropped, and I was left with this feeling of dread and horror, much to a lot of these movies on these lists. So out of left field, I have the documentary.
I love that pick.
Jesus Camp.
I really love that pick, and I was trying to find. I was trying to look through some documentaries, and when just my general search for horror movies from that decade, there's some movies that have horrific themes that don't get tagged in there. And I think I was trying to find, and I don't know which decade it was. Where was the one about the Westboro Baptist? How horrible and screwed up they are. I forget the name of it. Is Deliver Us from Evil, or it's some title like that. I don't know what decade it's in. I had a list of documentaries, and I don't know why this didn't come across, and because that's such a good pick.
Well, I will definitely defend your choice of Jesus Camp. I didn't put it on there. I didn't put any documentaries on here just because once you kick down that door, Like, there's the documentary The Bridge about people committing suicide off of the bridge. That is fucking horrifying. I'm sure there's any number of documentaries.
Like real life is more horrible.
It's
than
always going to be more horrifying.
Jeepers Creepers or anything we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But
What I will defend half of your pick. Like Jesus Camp, absolutely. It's one of those documentaries that makes me furious while I'm watching it. Like that was almost more my overwhelming. I was less scared than I was just these people exist, and I can't believe that you do that to children and that you love doing that to children. Like I hate them. Cropsey, I will respectfully disagree on. I think that the story is really strong and the history around the fact that it's a real thing is good, but it's one of those vanity documentaries where the people making the movie kind of make themselves the star of it.
Okay, I can buy that, and I don't think it's as good.
Michael Moore is guilty of this. That Sharkwater guy who passed away recently. There's a whole thing with documentaries where, for some reason, no matter what the subject is, it's always about the film.
fast food guy too.
Great example.
Yeah.
Well, like I said,
Super
probably
Size
didn't
Me.
make my list partly before that reason.
Yeah.
I found the story intriguing enough, and the sort of turns that it took, where they then focused on, is this an injustice done to the man who they thought was the killer of the children, and just the sort of groupthink terror that comes through the community terror of let's forget all rationality. And this is our guy. In a lot of ways, it's sort of similar to.
You need to be closer to them.
Sort of similar to those 3 documentaries about the young boys that were murdered, and they accused those
Paradise
three boys.
Lost?
Paradise Lost.
Yeah. And again, once you kick down this documentary door, that's why I didn't include documentaries.
Yeah,
like we wouldn't be including. Some very prominent.
We could do a list of the best documentaries of the noughties if you wanted.
But like I said, anyways,
solid pick.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
like it. 27. You can argue whether this is a horror movie or not. Battle Royale, and as a teacher, it is actually so good. It is so good because I understand the opening sequence and like I feel like we're 2 generations away from me being like knifed in the hallway for no particular reason. And I know some teachers that are getting burned out and get that kind of, this kids are against us type of thing, which leads to this insane idea. And all of the kids and how they're represented in there are totally authentic. I like the opening, we'll be friends forever, we'll work together. And then they all end up turning on each other. Social Darwinism. And it's essentially... It is what kids do to themselves or are doing through social media and psychologically right now. It's just shown physically. It's a brutal film. Not as brutal as some, but I mean it is. I really like it. The style is absolutely perfect. I mean, it was the right decade because the one actor I think was in Kill Bill Volume 1 and. Has such a great face for cinema. So
Battle Royale is Hunger Games on crack.
Yeah,
about 15
much
years
better.
The Hunger Games.
Much better than Hunger Games.
And as far as watching these types kill each other, I like the pick a lot, and I'm surprised it's on your list in a good way. Like you scored some points with me. It's not on my list, but I get it. It's one of those movies that like it kind of wears me out. Like,
it is.
It's an endurance test.
It is.
It becomes exhausting after a point.
Yeah.
After the next scene where these kids kill each other, and then the next scene where these kids kill each other.
And the variety of kills are just so creative.
To Jason's sort of comment though, I'm surprised more teachers haven't lost their Evan Levin mind, gone to school and kind of went, fuck you, you're cool, and start killing. Like, we're worried about children bringing guns.
Whenever I hear someone say I know how we stop shootings at schools, I'm the teachers. I was like,
Oh.
have you ever met any teacher ever?
No,
Like,
what a stupid
one of the
idea.
last people that should get guns are teachers,
Yeah.
and I am one. So, like,
no disrespect.
And
you guys.
and
No, like-
I, for the record, I love my job.
Yes,
I'm just
I
saying.
love my job. I love my
there's a
job.
point in the year where it's tough going for everybody.
Like dealing with even some of the parents and the children
Among staff too.
Staff. Oh my! Like you just kind of go, what? I'm the bad guy?
How did this happen?
Yeah,
It's obviously hit a nerve. I think, especially because you gentlemen are both teachers. Maybe there's something that bumps it up a notch.
Yeah.
All right, that's a great pick. My number 27, if I can find it here, is it's a zombie comedy tie, and you guys are gonna be like, why are these so low on the list? Shaun of the Dead and Zombieland.
Yeah.
Like sharing the position.
I feel so much better right now.
Well, here's the thing. I love the shit out of both of those
yeah.
movies. Like, I have a hard time choosing which one I like more. Sentimentally, I want to maybe give the edge to Shaun of the Dead, but Zombieland is fucking hilarious. It's got an astonishing repeat viewing value to it. Like, it's a really... My mom likes Zombieland.
Yeah.
You know, like, it just has a fun, bouncy quality. Yeah. And Shaun of the Dead, especially if you grew up watching the Romero zombie movies, is basically slow blowing you. Like, it's
it's bought dinner. it's turned the lights down low, and it's saying, I want to please you.
I love these movies so much, and the only reason they're ranking this low is because they just are more funny than scary.
They aren't scary. That's the problem.
So I could tell you were worried because you were going to include Shaun of the Dead so low, and I suspected that I put it lower than either of you, and it looks like that's the case.
I feel this great relief.
Well, this is where I'm the bad guy. And once again, it's in the honorable mentions. I didn't put either.
Oh, wow.
And the only reason why I didn't put either is because I see them as just kind of purely comedy. They are jumping into, obviously, the horror genre because it's zombies and they bring the love and the gore. I love me both. Like, please understand. If we were going to talk comedies or even just best films top 30, I think they would probably make it. It was just, okay, we're dealing with horror. And like, it went back and forth, but it was just one of those
this way I didn't have to put one on top of the other either.
This is so funny with all of my worry that I rank those movies higher than either of you gentlemen.
Like, to the listeners at home, it's like I'm actually sad.
Yeah,
that Shaun of the Dead and Zombieland aren't on my list. But I had at some point had to turn it off and go, this is the list.
We're 2 months away from a Zombieland sequel, whether we wanted it or not. Here it comes.
The funny thing, we'll obviously be talking about this again in a little bit, but recent viewings of them, because Shaun of the Dead is considered the more prominent of the two.
Yeah.
I had more fun watching Zombieland, and I think I did not have. When I saw it in theaters, my brain was probably in a different place where I liked it, but I didn't love it. I'm in the point where I love Zombieland now.
Yeah.
Still, I felt a lot of pressure that Shaun of the Dead is such an influential movie.
There's a lot of inside baseball in Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, and so
Zombieland
see as we get to that.
Rely on that. Zombieland's teaching you about a zombie world.
Yeah.
Shaun of the Dead assumes
you already have seen all of them.
About Zombieland, Woody Harrelson.
Yeah.
Woody Harrelson.
He's so much fun.
He's been nominated numerous times. I don't think he's ever won.
No.
He just gave us the gift of, what's the lead character's name again?
Tallahassee.
Tallahassee, with just
mwah.
Yeah.
That's my choice.
There you go.
26.
Number 26, and since we're talking about fun horror movies, and I'm including it on this list because it's a movie that I've seen so many times. That I just couldn't. Yeah, I know. An earthquake is happening. It's a horror movie that I've seen so many times that it just became ridiculous that I couldn't be off the list.
All right.
And I couldn't believe how good it was, considering that it was a versus movies. And you and I saw it together the first time. I have nothing but love for Freddy versus Jason. Here are two traditional horror teen titans that come together, and I couldn't believe that I was actually going yee-haw in this movie. Now, I get it that it's not, on some level, it's not a great movie, but it just became that right mixture of mwah, and it's so ridiculous that it's a over-the-top slapstick horror movie that, and I said, what made it be on the list is I've seen it so, like, wantingly wanted to see it so many times that at one point I kind of went, there's a reason why it's here, and I shouldn't feel any guilt or shame. So at number 26, I have Ronnie Yu's Freddy vs. Jason.
You had fun, and you've returned to it, and I'm not going to argue that. I remember when I was a kid, and they were starting to produce like Batmans and all these movies, and I would hear these rumors about, they have these scripts that they're developing, Alien versus Predator, Freddy versus Jason, and then years went by. I thought, that was just a bunch of crap. And then these movies are released. I'm like, now I don't know if it was a cash grab necessarily, but you can't take them seriously. I mean, they're just for entertainment and for fans of
They are
of the genre, and
fan
so
service.
so I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not going to jump down your throat over that. I mean, that's fair.
Here's the thing: it's a guilty pleasure movie for me.
Yeah, it is.
I
mentioned it a lot
yeah.
actually on I listened to some recent.
I made my guilty pleasure pick for this list, so it's not going to be showing up here on this list. But I have a lot of love for it. But it's like comfort food for me.
Yeah.
And again, like Lee said, it's not that it's like great. It's that I'm part of me is just happy that it exists.
Yeah.
you can accept it more than some of the entries in their separate
Oh yeah, for
franchises
sure.
because there's ones where they go way off the rails.
Hey, Ronnie Yu makes energetic
He does,
sequences. There's some really great stuff in it. There's some really dumb stuff in it. But
Yeah.
all in all, it's just a good time.
Yeah, Canadian
movie.
content.
I was just surprised about how many things it got right. And just the director itself, who I love, like you said, he makes like high energy, over the top, like go movies. That it was just this right mix. And even seeing it for the second time in theaters, I said, I can't believe how right they got it.
They know that this is stupid,
Yeah.
and like us, they love that this is
Stupid. So, like, I mean, the raver scene is just yummy, yummy. So I'm done.
Okay, nice choice. I'm going to kill the fun vibe
Uh-oh.
now. All right, high tension. Again, what I like about it is, I was surprised how many non-English language films I ended up with on this list. It seems like we have this killer and has no motivation for hunting down these women and beheading them, and it's stuck in this this house, and there's this family, and this character comes in and just kills the entire family, and just the friend of the daughter knows how to survive and attack this guy. And I liked a lot of the scenes. I think I've heard you mention it in the past that there is, spoilers, a giant plot twist at the end.
Yeah.
And I think you have a problem with it, and you
I
might talk
do.
about it in a moment. I didn't have a problem with it because I kept, unfortunately, I went into my head at points and I was like, why is this guy doing it? Like normally, especially in movies from this particular decade, there's a reason for this killer to do these things. And that answered the question for me. It's not like a Duel, where we have no idea why that truck is stalking that
shows
man. And that makes it more unsettling in some ways. And so maybe your point is that just leaving it that way would have been better. But
No, my point is that the twist doesn't hold up. If you watch the movie again, it doesn't make sense. The physical acts that this man does, like this 90-pound woman shouldn't be able to pull off. He pushes a bureau across the room and snaps a guy's neck with it. There's a car chase. How do we manage a car chase? Where she's driving in the car, her friend's in the back seat.
But is that real?
There's
I mean,
a car chasing them behind them. Well, the gas station attendant seems to acknowledge the other vehicle. I think there's a difference between a twist that like fools us and a movie that lies to us.
And you thought it lied.
This movie lied to me, I think. Alexandra Aja as a technical filmmaker is fucking amazing. Lee and I just watched Crawl the other night, and I had a blast.
I loved Crawl
the
too.
director, and I like a lot about the movie. I like the viciousness of the kills and the energy of the movie. Yeah. But when that twist fell out, I just felt my shoulders slump and went, "Really?
Yeah.
Oh no!"
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like 80% there with you. It's that last 20% that I just kind of felt to.
I mean, I don't know your opinion on it, but I knew it probably would not be on your list because you have mentioned problems that you have with it too.
Spoilers, we will be talking about this movie again, but once again, I understand Larry's point of view because when the twist happens, it doesn't make a lick of sense. One of the things that I think I've discovered myself about a movie goer is I love aesthetics a lot more sometimes over truth of narrative. I'm willing to buy that, where Larry's a lot more story guy. Yeah, story guy. But if you get that wrapped up in the twist, I can see it torpedoing you. But I won't lie to you, it's on my list, and we're going to talk about it.
It has a lot of qualities.
Yeah.
Like I said, like technically, it's a really, really mean and well executed slasher.
Yeah.
Like, I have a lot of respect.
Yeah, but I also get why he's like, nope, So
And I feel like if it was an English language remake, I probably would have more problems with it. I just somehow, if it's sometimes when it's not an American movie,
Right.
I can get behind things,
Also,
even if it's convoluted.
For European listeners, if we have any this week, it's also known as Switchblade Romance.
Yes, that's right. That's the other
It's
title.
more commonly known as Switchblade Romance on the other side of the ocean than
yeah.
it is here.
Yeah.
So, all right. Again, solid pick. I'm not mad. 26. This one surprises me. From 2008 and director Carter B. Smith, The Ruins.
yay!
It's one of these bad trip movies where people do things they shouldn't, go places they shouldn't, and there are terrible consequences. And the movie kind of never really let go of me. Like, I remember the first time I watched it thinking, shit, that was unpleasant. Like, I feel sticky and gross and sweaty just like those characters, which I guess means it's effective. And then I rewatched it for the podcast, and I was like, damn, that movie is really visceral. It's really, like, in your face, ugly. And, like, I just never completely shook it. And it comes to mind. It's kind of an unpleasant movie, so I get it not coming to mind. Like, let's have a good time and watch The Ruins tonight. But it is a fucking effective horror movie. And I really got to fucking hate those plants. Like, they're inanimate, basically, but I was just like, ugh.
The sound they make it's so annoying.
So I don't know. It's it made its way on the list. So there it is.
Guess what, Parsons?
We got it.
When you want to know what I have at number 25? It's Carter B.
Oh,
Smith's
there you go.
The Ruins. Once
you're close.
again, I'm going to sort of just spit out the same sort of stuff that Larry just mentioned. That movie is a cold, cold cup of coffee that really causes you indigestion. The scene where they discover that the plants are echoing the screams and the cell phone is where I went, oh. Forget the fact that this
That's
is
creative.
the plants that
very
actually
creative.
go up into the wounds and whatnot.
Cutting the vines out of her leg and shit like
and
that.
they have to and they have to cut off legs and arms. This I have a fear this movie is going to fall into this sort of DVD obscurity, and it's a shame because this is a full blown horror movie. I remember when they were making this movie that a lot of websites were excited about saying this book is really, really good and it's a terrifying horror movie, and they had this sort of this web. I don't know what's the word. There was a lot of hysteria on the web about this movie, and then it did nothing. It disappeared.
It came and went. Yeah.
Came and went. I can't say enough good things about The Ruins. It is a strong, solid horror movie where good things don't happen. And like I said, and who knew that making plants scary was this hard? Shame on you, The Happening. And anytime you want Dave the Triffids, Dave the Triffids is a terrifying thing. But anytime you want a really full-blown terrifying plants are evil movie,
Here it is.
Here is The Ruins.
Yeah.
Because at number 25, I have the Ben Stiller produced The
Yes, that's right.
Ruins.
Stiller.
Do you have any thoughts on The Ruins?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed there were a lot of movies that looked like this that were released at the same time,
Right.
and so I missed it in theaters, and then I sought it out for this, watched it, and it was on my runner-up list.
Okay.
And I get all of your points, and I just, for whatever reason, I found movies that stuck with me a little bit more, and I don't know if it was just a little bit too much of that type of movie, but it's probably the best, because there were Touristas, and it seemed like every week there was a movie that looked like this.
These bad trip movies.
But I would sort of hear rumors that The Ruins is so much better than the rest of them, and you could do a lot worse. It is a very awful film, and it just puts their characters in an impossible position, which from the very beginning. One thing I did like about it too, I just we won't be talking about it again, is that you had that the random, was he German character that leads them to go to the ruins.
Yeah.
Initially, I thought, okay, he's
going to be the problem.
He's going to be the villain, or it's like a hostile type of thing.
Poor guy.
And no, he is probably one of the worst victims of this this thing. So
I will say that another sort of subgenre that showed up in the horror films, and The Ruins is part of this, is the whole dirty white Americans who go visit a foreign country and so arrogant and egotistic.
Yeah.
Cultural vengeance.
Vengeance that
we at first are sort of let's kill those Americans, but by the end you're like,
No.
whoa, the punishment did not fit the crime.
The one guy is going to be a doctor. I mean,
but they're like, this really started to show up in this decade. It's still there, but it's there.
It's in a way, it's sort of like that Danny Boyle movie, The Beach, as a horror movie.
Oh, okay, yeah.
What was your 25th ranking?
Okay, 25th. This is where Zombieland
Okay.
fell. Love Zombieland. A lot of fun. Spoilers, one of the greatest cameo appearances of all time. And, I mean, who would not want a zombie Bill Murray? And I don't know if Woody Harrelson is why Bill Murray did it, because he was this a first feature for this director?
No.
Ruben Fleischer. Ruben Fleischer. I don't know if he had a relationship with Bill Murray or how Bill Murray got connected to this, but that section's cool. But all of the lead up before that is
and
amazing.
It's not like you have to wait around for that. You're being entertained the whole time, and then fucking Bill Murray shows up, right? And
great cast. I mean, Emma Stone is in this before she hit it really big, and I had a lot of fun watching it again. I wasn't sure originally if it was going to even make my list, and I thought, I need to give it another chance.
It's too much fun to not acknowledge
it's fun.
it. I mean, I feel like
there's plenty of gore if you like your zombie movies.
You know what, Dubray? I'm going to say that I'm wrong and you were right. This was his first big theatrical. Directional.
Didn't he do the one where the guy was forced to rob a bank again?
That came later.
Was that
That's
after?
2011. Before that, he had Between Two Ferns with Zach Galifianakis,
right,
and some TVs. But this is
his first feature. Okay,
so
but he was connected to the comedy world enough.
Wrong, dudes.
To get Murray in.
Here on this date, Lee Beckmann was wrong. Everybody, mark your count.
It's never happened before.
Do you have anything else you want to say about Zombieland?
I have nothing but deep love for Zombieland, and I feel shame and dismay that it's not on my list.
25th place, yes. From Gore Verbinski. He actually came back to the horror genre recently for The Cure for Wellness. Kind of felt like I was one of the only people who liked that movie, but...
you like it too? Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
He did the remake of The Ring with Naomi Watts.
Okay.
And I get that it's not aged particularly well. Like, it's already feels like an old movie from 2002. But just for the experience of seeing this movie for the first time in the theater... It really it got to me. There was a couple of proper jump scares early in the movie, and then this intriguing mystery that everybody knows: if you watch the forbidden tape, you'll die in 7 days.
Yeah.
And of that ilk of PG horror movies that started the decade, I think it's one of the better ones of them. I get that its impact is lessened now, but I can't really overstate how effective it was.
It was very important early in the decade.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of thought you might have done the list. I had the original on my 90s list. It's not on the list for me, but I respect the choice.
It expands
it makes
on
sense.
the backstory way more than the original movie does. That disturbing sequence where the horse dives off the ferry, that's nowhere to be seen in the original movie. And I there's something about that scene, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, this won't be the last time we're talking about it.
Okay.
Spoilers, it's on the list.
Yeah.
I figured it would be.
I'm nodding my head.
Yeah.
Like I said, The Ring. I'm just surprised it's as low as it is.
There it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm the jerk on this one because I don't know why it doesn't work for me, but it.
At number 24, I have the sort of loving throwback to the 80s slashers that is Adam Green's Hatchet.
Yep.
This movie is short and a lot of fun. It also brings the red. In fact, it has one of the most horrific scenes of violence ever put on cinema. That I mean, it even says outgrosses Cannibal Holocaust with its death. This movie is fun, and since right now as we speak, Victor Miller and Seamus Cunningham are fighting over the rights of Friday the 13th.
That's as close as we got.
We won't be getting a Friday for, I'd say, another 5 years, because that's where I think it's going. In the meantime, and your good friend Scott and I had this conversation about, well, hey, since Friday's not playing, let's throw some love out to Hatchet. And so here I am, Adam Green, saying, you're a good filmmaker. You maybe need to get away from the series and produce some more original horror. Not that saying that Hatchet isn't original horror per se, but it's the right amount of, and even like the red shirts they're a lot of fun.
It's a harder movie to make than you'd think.
Yeah.
Have you any opinion on the Hatchet?
I didn't get to it.
Okay.
It's fun.
I feel
Can I tell you?
Yeah,
a
because
story?
I know it's important. It's
Can I tell you a story?
Yeah.
I remember seeing the movie, and Lee hadn't seen it yet, and I told him to watch the movie, and that it's going to be a little rocky. The first 20 minutes, you're not sure what you're going to get. But then I'm going to tell him something's going to happen. I didn't tell him what. I said, something's going to happen. You'll know it when it happens. And you'll just relax.
Yep.
And I stand by that.
Yeah.
Okay. You'll know when it happens, and you'll be like,
oh, this is what we're doing. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I feel like I'm gonna be like Francis Ford Coppola here with my, 2000s list redux coming out after I'm writing down all of these that I failed to see over the years. So
What's your 24th selection?
24th, it was a movie that really performed well. Got lots of Oscar nominations. District 9, and so I'm interested in particular how Lee feels about it, because you've lived in the country where it's set, but the whole alien invasion idea is an allegory for the apartheid, and it's got some really gory moments. It's very well written, well directed, terrific effects throughout, and I really didn't know what I was getting into when I saw it. For whatever reason, I wasn't excited to see the movie in theaters, and I saw it, I was like, holy crap, this is brilliant. And then I was happy that the rest of the world kind of jumped on. Neil Blomkamp, I'm not sure he's really achieved that kind of success with his follow-ups.
No.
But,
well, here's the thing, and maybe part of it is the diminishing returns that have been Neil Blomkamp, but I'm of the unpopular opinion that District 9 is somewhat overrated. I do like the movie. I do like it a lot.
Yeah.
But it's all about the presentation and the performance. It's actually riddled with science fiction cliches, like him stumbling into the house of the one guy who's actually building a spaceship underneath.
Yeah,
Is like the whole savior thing that he goes through, the transformation he goes through. All of this is shit we've seen before, but we've never seen it with this style, and we've never seen it taken this serious.
and that quasi-documentary quality,
Absolutely.
I like that.
It
works
feels
well.
real world. And I think that it's one of those that because of that, I mean, it gets a lot of 10-star reviews, where it's probably a 7 or 8-star movie for me. But I do like it a lot.
I don't think. I mean, it was so big the year it came out.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it's held in that high esteem now.
yeah.
It's one of these Best Picture nominees that years later, it's like, oh,
It
really?
was a
That
bold choice, but was it a right one? Yeah.
But I still think it's solid.
I love this movie. I'm kind of a little bit on Parsons' sides, where I think it nominated for Best Picture. I kind of went. I don't think the racist allegories are not they're not subtle.
Never are.
Yeah,
Never are.
No.
I can tell you. I mean, he is South African. The depiction of the Boer. The sort of militarized white rage people, I think is pretty accurate. I've met people who were part of the Boer, and a good black person is a dead black person. Here's my gun, sort of mentality.
Yeah.
It's scary. It really is.
Yeah. Well, South Africa can be a scary country. I am hesitant to sort of that is not the South Africa I know. Obviously, the sort of increasingly violent, hyper-stylized violent movie. At the same time, there's some really scary, deep problems in Cape Town, in South Africa, to do with racism and crime and class separation.
Would you rather see like a straight-on film about that as opposed to this, or was he doing his own thing? I mean,
Remember when we talked about that Monsters Dark Continent movie?
Yes, yeah.
On that similar level, I really appreciate the movie because it's making people who wouldn't maybe otherwise think about this think about this, right?
Yeah.
So I respect that for sure. And again, I don't think it's a bad movie at all. It's
No,
just a movie.
it's a good movie.
And how many South African filmmakers have gotten into that kind of worldwide attention?
I think a more movie that depicts the struggles in South Africa is Tsotsi.
Yes.
But does that jump to people's mind before District 9?
No, it doesn't, clearly. But that film won Best Picture at the Academy Awards for Best Foreign Film.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I do think that depiction is a lot more intelligent and a lot more authentic. But at the same time, I mean, they're talking about in District 9. They are talking about
the separations, what apartheid has done, and what happens instead of people of African descent being sort of the targets. Here's this new race, these alien beings that they hate. I honestly think that the creatures in District 9 are really a substitute for colored people in South Africa, where we used to have the whites hate the blacks and the blacks hate the whites, but together they really don't like colored people because the colored people were a shining example, because at some point a white person and a person of African descent at least made love and produced a child, and so it represented a lot of their own flaws. And so here
we're getting
here
pretty
they
deep
hate
in the weeds, baby.
yeah, but no, I mean this is also part of true, and so I found that angle, because you see a lot of people from dark colored people from Africa. Oh, I hate the aliens, but at the same time they're living in poverty themselves. They're living in townships. Yeah. Which was created by
how many of them were born in South Africa themselves?
And so,
anyway, I think we're getting pretty deep in the weeds.
And I'm looking for Trevor Noah's autobiography. I think is going to be made into a movie, and I'm looking forward to that in a more realistic look at.
We'll have a very, very deep apartheid discussion in a podcast that has to do with that.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I honestly felt the over-the-top violence actually hurt District 9 somewhat.
Okay,
but I still liked it. Okay.
In 24th place, it's my turn to talk about the torture porn genre. I don't like the visceral violence stuff. The slow, watching someone slowly be cut apart on a table does nothing for me. But there's something about the psychological torment that digs deep. I'm going to give special mention to The Strangers from 2008 by Brian Bertino, because I think the suspense in that movie is really strong. But I'm going to give 24th place to Eden Lake from 2008. And James Watkins. Michael Fassbender is in this before he was really, really big. And it's mean-spirited in a way that only British movies seem able to accomplish. Are you shaking your head because
I'm shaking because I was trying? It was on a list of movies I was going to watch, and I didn't get to it before this. So
it's a bitter little pill. Don't get me wrong. I can understand people walking away from this movie saying, "The fuck are you recommending?" But I'm talking about the torture porn genre.
Yeah,
and it's just one of these things where these people go to the wrong place at the wrong time. And shit starts to escalate. And shit starts to escalate, and then shit gets way the fuck out of hand, and then it continues to escalate. And it's just this slow motion car wreck that you can't really look away from. The acting's really good, and it doesn't leave you feeling happy, but it definitely stays with you.
I've heard it's among the best of it.
Yeah, a lot of people would say this is where funny games should be. This is the funny game slot. I'm going to say it now, and if it's on one of your lists, respect. Fuck funny games.
Oh, I don't like funny games.
Fuck
no, it made me mad.
Fuck both of those movies.
Yes.
Fuck funny games.
Yes.
Not on my list.
Eden Lake, if you haven't seen it, it's getting more of a reputation these days, 10 or 15 years later. But when it came out, it was just another movie. Maybe it's because Fassbender has since popped, but it's ugly and worth your time.
Oh, and also there were 7 of these being released each week, and which,
how do you pick?
What is the cream and what's the shit? I mean,
I have it in my honorable mentions. The only reason why I didn't make my list is because I had other films in the sort of torture porn genre that I thought were maybe not better, but just there was other mentions I wanted to mention. I want to talk about it. But Eden Lake is in on my honorable mentions. I agree with everything that you said. It's one of those, oh my god, people!
What are you doing?
It's great. I highly recommend it. Eden Lake is good, but it's not on my list.
The Strangers by Brian Bertino is one of those things that overperformed for me because it's very familiar in everything that's happening.
Because there was the other one, and I get the two movies mixed up: The Strangers and the other one with Luke Wilson.
Vacancy. So The Strangers is Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman. And these people in masks just show up and start terrifying them. It's not even about the killing and the murders; it's the way they torment them.
See, I feel like I've seen it, but I don't remember it. So
well, that's not high praise.
No, I guess.
But here's the thing: it is a very familiar premise, and I've said this about Bertino before. My friend Matt and I reviewed this movie he did called The Monster, which is everything that you'd expect a monster movie to be, but just well executed. And that's kind of how I feel about The Strangers. It's sort of an honorable mention here, but it's a home invasion thriller, and we've seen them before, but there's something about it that stuck with me. So I'll pass it to you, Beckmann.
At number 23, I have my second tie, and this is sort of honoring what I would call the French extreme new wave. We've already talked about High Tension. I don't want to mention anything more about it. I think it is a well-made slasher thriller that big twist can totally make you not like the movie and understand why Parsons is nodding his head.
But it's well made.
It is well made. But also the other film I want to talk about is a film called Inside. Inside is a nasty, nasty, like primal little pill. And it also suffers from some twists and turns that could really jettison them, or not jettison, it could really hurt the movie, but I went along with it. It has one of the greatest horror villains in the movie. Basically what the plot is that the movie starts off with a car accident, and we then find out that our antagonist has lost her husband but is still pregnant, and she's on the eve of giving birth. The next day she's being driven to the hospital to have a cesarean, to get it induced. And a stranger shows up at the door, and it's this other woman, and she really wants this baby.
Like, really wants
wants this baby. And it turns into a home invasion thriller that never says no. It's on this list for the last 10 minutes. Okay. The last 10 minutes of this movie, you feel rotten to be a human being. The violence is unreal, but that ending, man, like you need a hug. You need a hug and a shot of whiskey. It's like if you want to feel bad about the world, it's like leaving Las Vegas, Requiem for a Dream, Monsters Ball, Inside. It's just this like.
Oh, wow.
Have you seen Inside?
I haven't. I feel like we have a list of 30 to watch after
the
this.
violence is unreal.
Yeah.
I found it really well made. Once again, I get why you would hate this movie.
I thought you were going to say Martyrs when you were saying your pause.
No.
This is the other one, like hard French cinema where we see women just brutalized. Mm-hmm. And in Inside, not only do you get the treat of seeing a woman brutalized, you get to see a pregnant woman brutalized.
Yeah.
Do I find that entertaining? No, I don't. Is it well made and well acted? Yes, it is. For me personally, I just don't get any enjoyment out of it. Even Martyrs, which I could understand that being on one of you guys' list, because I mean it's a torture porn movie that is about something. Mm-hmm. It's just so wall to wall fucking unpleasant that I there was room to put Dagon. I will feel better about Dagon being on my list. And I get it. It is a capital H horror movie, and it is fucking horrifying. Respect, but it's not on my list.
To me, it's the ending. It's the ending. And there's another movie that we'll talk about where the ending is so darkly nihilistic. And I think it's kind of representative of, what this decade, the innocence was gone. Yeah. And you could argue that we're seeing a pregnant woman severely tortured and that's taboo. I get it. I think the acting of both our villain and our lead is so choice that when that ending happens, you're just going, oh, I cried. Yeah. I cried. And I went, okay, this movie is powerful enough that I can't leave it off the list, but it's just... Oh,
you got lots of horror homework, Dave.
I do. This one does sound like homework, though.
Oh, yeah. Because the ending is what really makes it go.
Because I've heard you talk, Larry. I've heard you talk about some of these with these violence against women, and you get no pleasure out of these movies. And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm ultimately more on your side with this, but
I can respect what they're doing, but
I also know. If you're putting it on here, it must be solid.
It's not just the violence against women because other people come into the house at certain points.
It's grueling. It's just the grueling.
It's an endurance test. Yeah. So it's not just women suffering. At certain points, the cops are called and they're come. Friends of this woman are called and they come in, and our villain takes care of them. So it does become a home invasion thriller. But if you struggle with seeing a beautiful pregnant woman lose everything, then you will have a problem with this movie.
Fair enough.
All right, number 23 on my list is another Stephen King adaptation from quite a short story, which is exaggerated, I think, on the whole, effectively, 1408.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Mikhail Hofstrom is the director. This is very much the John Cusack show, and I know there's some hate on for John Cusack in some circles, but I'm a huge John Cusack fan.
When he's on,
he's on in this one, and it's just one of these things where he's this writer who is so cynical because he's always being told to check out these hotel rooms where there are ghosts. And he doesn't believe any of this, and he goes to New York, and he's warned, and they won't book it. Like, most of these places want him to come in and write about their hotels to get business. This high-profile hotel in New York does not want him to stay in there. Samuel L. Jackson plays, and it's kind of an interesting role for him, this hotel manager who tries to talk him out of it, does everything, but it doesn't work. And Cusack actually wants to stay there, and it is a psychological nightmare, and it's claustrophobic. And you think, well, there's several rooms. It's not like a small hotel room, but I feel like if there'd been a version of The Shining where we were stuck in one room in the Overlook Hotel for a long period of time, that's what this would be. And there are moments where it seems like there's hope, and again, it's taken away, maybe not as dramatically as in The Mist. So I really like it. The source material I loved. I remember reading that collection, and that story stuck with me. And I was pleased to see movie versions of these. I mean, they'll milk all of Stephen King's. One of the ones I read recently that I'm surprised, unless I'm wrong about this, it hasn't been turned into a movie of some kind, is Eyes of the Dragon. But they'll take it. Yeah, they take everything that he's ever written, and I think they did a pretty faithful job, and they exaggerated it in the right ways. Because to be totally true, there's no way that it would be a 10-minute film or something.
Well, it's one of the longer stories in the book. I think that the flaw for me is that they do kind of stretch the story to the breaking point a little bit in the movie. It just, but if you're a fan
too much LA in there.
If you're a fan of John Cusack, you safe bet.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really solid Stephen King adaptation, and these don't happen as often. I wish I could find a place for it in the top 30. Yeah. I did not. I do like it, and I do think it's nice that we get the John Cusack show, and he comes in, because where I'm at with John Cusack is I'm a wannabe John Cusack. Because, back in the day, he gave us some really good stuff. I love High Fidelity.
Oh,
I love
me too.
Point Blank. And, I kind of feel like he's one of these guys, and I mean, I'm making it up because I've never talked to the man, but he's just been making movies since he was like 12 years old. And sometimes I just feel like he's over it. He
will admit, he said, these are the films that I've done that are worth watching, the other ones not so much.
Yeah, and if he can say that, and if I can see it on his face, to me, if you're getting paid that much to act, try.
Yeah.
And I kind of resent it when I feel like he's not trying. Happily in 1408, he shows up for work.
I could have met him if I'd gone to the Calgary Comic Expo, because he's doing that circuit these days too. And I would have liked to have done that, but it's so freaking expensive for those things, and so
again, I want this idea of my head of him being a super nice, warm person to continue.
He's very political these days. He's a very political guy these days.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on 1408?
Once again, I think it's a pretty strong, solid horror thriller. There's just, to me, there were so many good movies that it didn't make the list. I have nothing against it. I think it's an adequate Stephen King adaptation. There's nothing wrong with it per se. It's just there's so many, to me, many stronger horror films than 1408.
Okay.
But
I have a bias towards King, so I really like the King stuff.
I have nothing but love King. You're gonna see some King rank high on this list.
So in my 23rd position, this was a tough one. I will give an honorable mention to The Orphanage, which I think is really good. Spanish.
It is so good.
I'm actually going to give the slot, and again, this kind of surprises me, but I revisited it and liked it a lot. The Others. Alejandro Amenábar, Nicole Kidman, Christopher Eccleston. I think it did very well actually theatrically, but the big hurt that The Others had against it was that it came out so close to The Sixth Sense, and that it was in a lot of ways quite similar to that.
I think it was 01.
Yeah, they do have, I think Sixth Sense was 99, so they're pretty close. But people were more familiar and waiting for the twist to kick in.
Yeah.
And I think that the more this movie ages and the more separation you get from that, the fact that it is a period piece and the fact that it is, I think, one of the stronger performances I've seen from Nicole Kidman, and the fact that those two little kids are fantastic.
They are great.
the stakes are really settled. Why, when we first meet these kids and they have this light allergy where the sunlight itself can kill them, like these poor little vampires, and they're trapped in this mansion, this dark candlelit mansion by necessity with their mom, and they're going out of their fucking mind.
And they want to be kids. So
And it really works for me. It really works for me. And it's one of those ones when I first saw it, I thought it was fine. It was okay. It's a solid movie, but it just has grown.
Yeah.
It's just grown and it's esteemed. And
you're not going to get an argument with me. The two movies you mentioned are likely to be mentioned again. So
it was like I wanted to represent a proper haunted house movie, and I couldn't decide between those.
And I wasn't doing ties, so that's the thing I was struggling with. Is they're both very similar in style.
Both very somber stories when you get down to it.
But
well, once again, I agree with you. I think part of the reason why the others didn't make my list, and the Orphanage for different reasons, was that it came so close after The Sixth Sense that I knew there was a twist, but I didn't know what it was. But within minutes, I kind of thought, I won't spoil it, but I figured out the twist early on. And once that happened, it became sort of a waiting game. It's technically well made. It's beautiful to look at. I agree with you that Nicole Kidman brings her A game. The children bring their A game. It's just that I figured out the twist early on. And so it wasn't a surprise. And like I said, it was a waiting game. It's good. I haven't seen it in a couple of years. But it's not on my list.
There's something so tragic about it. Like the essential story, once it's all played out.
It is very sad in both cases.
A lot of ghost stories are, though.
They're essentially tragedies. But yeah, that's my 23rd, The Others, with a little honorable mention for The Orphanage.
I haven't seen a car in 50 miles.
You know what I just thought of, right?
Kenny and Darla.
You believe that story?
That they had to go looking for her head.
They only found the car.
They never found her head.
What's he doing?
The hell is that? He dumped something down that pipe.
Wrapped in a sheet. Is this your idea of a little adventure?
I'm just gonna look.
Hello? You know the part in scary movies where somebody does something really stupid and everybody hates them for it? This is it.
Every 23rd spring, for 23 days, it gets to eat.
Eat.
What the hell is that thing?
Go, 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 go!
It's stuck in reverse!
He must have 5, maybe 600 bodies down there.
You've got something it likes, one of you.
I know that Lee has a big love for Jeepers Creepers, and he always has. Like, I remember the first time I saw it, you were showing it to me, and you couldn't fucking wait to show it to me. You were very excited about it. And I really, like, I locked in, especially with the first third of the movie, and I just felt like the deeper into the movie, the kind of lamer the movie got. But overall, I mainly liked it, but it didn't have this large looming thing for me.
Yeah.
But you bring it up, it comes up in conversation with you quite often. You were on the Terror Table podcast talking about it.
Yeah.
Like, you've reviewed a full-length review of this before, and given the choice to choose any movie you wanted, you chose to do another full-length review of it. So what the fuck is it about Jeepers Creepers that you're so excited about? Because, like, I'm gonna mostly defend the movie. Like, I don't hate the movie, and I don't think the controversy should be the conversation about the movie necessarily. But all things aside, it's okay. What the fuck? that's my opening salvo to you.
All right. Okay. Fair enough. Have you noticed that my sleeves are rolled up? I'm ready to talk. Look, Jeepers Creepers is a fascinating movie for many reasons. One of them is Victor Salvo, but I'll get to that. Right off the bat, we get a genuinely well-designed monster. So that's why I sort of sit and turn a little bit. Like, really, you're going to say it's okay? The fact that this creature has got, like, nostrils, the design of it, and it's got nostrils coming out of its nose, it's got wings, it's
got nostrils coming out of its nose, doesn't everyone?
But it's got numerous.
I see. Okay.
Multiple nostrils,
Plethora.
For me, it's a dude in a suit and a Halloween mask, and he has wings sometimes. Like, even compared to
you are disrespecting the creeper, and I will not have this in this podcast.
Jason Voorhees isn't the most complex image. But for me, it's in a way got more staying power. As a monster goes, if the thing is a monster made of Boro pieces, it looks like a dude in a suit and a Halloween mask. And I'm glad that they keep it in the shadows as much as they do, frankly.
I agree that the more we see of the creature, the less terrifying it is.
Right.
But just as a general concept of what it does, it's fascinating to me, considering the creator, writer, director, Victor Salva. This is a creature that genuinely hunts down and swallows, huge chunks of little boys' bodies. It's kind of terrifying, that in itself.
So you're saying that Jeepers Creepers is Victor Salva dealing with his psychosis of child molestation in the way that Antichrist is Lars von Trier dealing with his depression? Like they're both grinding their axes just in different ways?
Yes, that's
an interesting comparison.
That's a roundabout way of doing it as well, and this is solidified if you watch the end sequence, and it's hard to see, but playing by the recorder at the end when the creeper is ripping apart Justin Long and you're hearing it, there's a photo of a young Victor Salva, and he's coming out and saying, "Yes, I am the creeper." This is a film where he is working out the demons of being a child molester. And once you kind of realize that it's a confession in a lot of ways. It's
that's
really,
true.
Yeah.
I just like the movie a little bit less.
That's fine. That's great.
Because then that is the art, and when we were talking about judging,
I can separate it if it's an evil demon movie.
Yeah.
And then whereas once
I
say,
understand you wanting to separate that, but
I get whereas once I said that's a really creepy scene where they're describing how the creeper was sniffing the laundry. But then when I put this ugly child molester bent on it, then it just becomes this perv thing, right? In a way, I like it more.
Playing in ugly waters, and I understand.
Should we respect him for having the quote balls to do that? But is that what he's doing, or is that what we're seeing because of the controversy?
You could argue either other way, but I find those coincidences too compelling.
He puts himself in there.
I
didn't know that until you told me.
Why else would he put himself in there?
That worries me a bit more than.
But turning
it is interesting that he casts himself as the monster.
But then again, what are you doing but turning your crime into a piece of entertainment?
Confession, I would say, and.
It's as much of a confession as Kevin Spacey playing his House of Cards character last year on
YouTube.
Yeah, on YouTube, which was such a stupid decision. I'd say there's going to be more information that you're going to know about me, and it's like, what? Who advised you to do this? You're making things so much worse.
Okay.
And
once again, I want to back up the top plot because once again we've dived into it with him. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to start in such an aggressive stance. Like I said,
no, I don't mind the aggression. I'm just gonna say, right off the bat, really, you're calling the creeper a man in suit. I find that disrespectful, son.
That's how I feel.
That's fine. I respect the decision.
I'm probably closer to Larry in this one.
I just think you're both wrong, but that's okay. That's okay.
A brother and sister who are really well acted. Gina Carano, what's her name?
Gina Phillips.
Thank you. Yeah. And Justin Long. And one of the more roles that I've connected with him, honestly, I typically find him kind of a bland actor.
Yes.
Justin Long.
But typically I'm not like, woo, Justin Long. Every now and then he shows up.
I had no excitement about seeing him in Drag Me to Hell.
Right.
Okay.
But
he has more to do in this.
I really liked Derry in this, and I really liked the relationship with the sister, and I really liked that they took the first 15 minutes to make us know them and like them a little bit before the scares started, so that we gave a shit.
Did you like
them? I did. Yeah. Well, I respected their dynamic. I get that he's a bratty kid and she's a bossy older sister, and they had their problems, but I understood the dynamic. It was familiar, and I got it. So that when they started making these increasingly bad horror movie decisions, I was just like, oh, come on, you guys. But it wasn't blowing the meal for me because I wanted them to get through to the other side of the story.
Yeah.
And the slow introduction of the creeper is done very well, I think. We first see him driving in a car, and then we sort of see shadows and silhouettes, and he's described to us. And in those scenes, he's scary.
Yeah.
But to go back to where I started, the deeper we get into the movie, and the more we see this guy, and when the decapitations and the smiling Halloween face starts showing up, I'm not scared. I'm kind of bemused and amused, but all of the scare is out of the movie by the third act. It still has that bummer ending, and it doesn't give you the ending you want, and it's sort of got that memorable to be continued vibe to it. Franchise me.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't against the idea of more Jeepers Creepers, but I wasn't excited as I felt like you were, as I was supposed to be. I just really, really love the first act. I really like the second act, and by the third act, I was starting to check my watch a little bit.
Really?
Quite a bit. Yeah.
I shake my head. Clearly, Victor Salva is a very skilled director. I love the homage with the opening shot to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then we have a Hitchcock homage where the vehicle comes like all the way back. This is a man that loves film. He loves filmmakers, and he loves the genre. And there's all these little loving tributes that he uses as sort of skill sets. As an art teacher, I love the sort of Harmonious Bosch sort of tip of the hands when we get down into the creeper's lair. And he not only discovers like the one body all tied up, but then we see like all the bodies sort of almost apocalyptic, of the devil up on the
so dry they're like almost wood. Formed into the wall.
Yeah, like that's
the whole layer and the pipe, the body drop pipe.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty
That worked.
cool.
The farmhouse.
Yeah. This
is
all.
I like seeing him from a distance, like you said.
This is all again the first half an hour of the movie.
Yeah. No. I hear you. It's all really well executed. I love the scene with at the diner as well.
There was a temptation to go into some cliches in there. I thought they did some things in there. You talked about they make some bad mistakes that horror movie characters make, but that was a very logical reaction. Like there are other people, and in a lesser movie, the people in there are like, oh, those kids are crazy, let's ignore them or something, and then they'd be stuck being chased by the creeper and nobody in the town would notice this. Here, the police get involved and there is actually like some stuff that happens.
There's also the old psychic lady who shows up and knows.
I had a problem with that.
And I agree that I think that's one of the weak links of the movie is like she's more used as a plot device than anything else. I thought that was a bit of a stretch. I'll give you that. Getting back to the brother and sister, they have a good 5 minutes of character introduction, and then we get obviously the creeper coming to visit. But yeah, the first 15 minutes we really buy and get to love this whole brother and sister. You can tell they love each other and also drive each other crazy just being around each other. It was just very authentic. And the dialogue very I wouldn't say cliche, but just you bought it, you believed it.
Right.
And I loved the performances of both of them. Like it was so enough that when the ending does happen, I was really, really feeling for the Justin Long character.
Well, I like the concept that the thing is collecting body parts, but it's not sure what it wants from you or who maybe necessarily it wants. So the stalking isn't just it fucking with you; it's actually there's purpose.
There's a reason.
There's purpose for it. There's the whole sequence with the police officers where like all of a sudden it completely emerges from the shadows. Yeah. Up until this point, there's been suggestions and silhouettes and stories, and now it's in full light, standing on top of it with this weird jack-o'-lantern smile and decapitating cops with this big side-looking fucking thing. And once it stepped out of the shadows and was sort of hello.
Yeah, you've lost
the mystique was gone, and
Also, in that situation, why are the brother and sister driving by themselves? Why is there not a police officer with one of them, and the other is riding along? But then
to play devil's advocate again, because I don't hate this movie. Just has some images. He pulls the tongue out of the severed head.
Yep.
That thing on the highway. That's pretty fucked up. Yep. And I guess like the first time that you realize it sprouts wings and that part of its skill set is that it can stalk you from above. Yeah. It added an extra wrinkle where all of a sudden like you have to watch
I
not just your back but above.
This is a terrifying creature and it's beautifully well designed.
And that's something that none of the other slasher we don't have a lot of flyers. So I mean that's maybe faint praise, but I'll give it that.
I like it a lot more than Drag Me to Hell.
I love the mythology of it. I love the rules of this universe.
I feel like this particular decade needed a Freddy Krueger, and this is the Freddy Krueger, but it's a special effect.
Right.
It's not.
But he doesn't have the cheesy one-liners.
That's true.
Yeah.
But the movies do increasingly have their cheesiness.
Yep. I'm not disputing that.
But because I had forgotten about the director was the director of Powder and all of that, and then I was looking at that afterwards. And like, what an odd choice to make this. You know, did he want it to be that close to what had happened, and then you're adding another layer to it that.
It's a terrifying movie.
But I really don't like to go and.
It's a confession.
And treat this movie. I want to treat it as a horror movie that's made by this guy who, in his personal life, has
it's
made
hard
some really
to
horrible
separate the man
mistakes.
from the movie if the man's not separating himself from the movie.
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk some shit about Lars von Trier. I don't like the person. When we're talking about Antichrist, he's certainly not a child molester. He's he's not someone who's done time for grooming, basically seducing, hunting, and it's horrifying. It's horrifying. But I got this feeling like in any given movie, there's hundreds of people involved.
Yeah.
There's probably.
It's such a collective art,
There's a rapist in that group. There's a racist in that group. There's a guy who beat his kids in that group. Are we not allowed to watch a movie that's made by somebody who's done bad things?
Yeah.
Or when and where and how? And it's a hard, not easy thing to answer because the more he mixes himself into the movie, the more I feel gross for having watched it. And look, it's great that I understand artists put themselves into their work. I understand that, but this dude is a legit child molester. It's not one of these things where he was 17 and his girlfriend was 15, and then all of a sudden she turned 16, he turned 18, and he was statutory raping. No, this guy hunted children, right? He's bad. So it's a tough thing for me. Usually I take the approach of fuck all of that, because what does that have to do with the movie? But in this case, it's kind of insisting itself a little bit, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So if I have to take that seriously, and if he wants me to take that seriously, your movie just became significantly less fun and significantly more gross, and I do like it a little bit less. Well, maybe that's wrong, but I genuinely do.
I'm feeling mixed feelings about actually liking this movie. It's a thumbs up review for me. Not an enthusiastic thumbs up, but it has some problems. But part is not.
But does all art have to be good to have value? This is a man who'd already done his time.
He did his time. Yeah.
He went to jail. He is deeply, deeply apologetic. He is working,
making money off of it. He's profiting off of this. But he's making money out of it, right? This is his personal therapy now, and he's people do that with their art, and good for them. But should we pay money for it?
William S. Burroughs, he did the same thing. He was a huge drug addict. He slept with little boys. He's written about it. Should we stop reading him or giving it some sort of value because of it? But I understand the desire to not give money to it and say I out of political moral choices I'm not going to see this, but at the same time this is a human being that has gone through the process of doing it, got caught, is dealing with the demons of all of that and putting that onto a canvas in this film.
Could he make a documentary about this is what I was like, and this is this is the process I've gone through, this is where I'm at now, so that we have a better understanding of the mind of a child molester, and then release that film instead of creating a very popular genre piece that a lot of people go.
This would be so much easier if the movie sucked.
Yeah, well,
it would be so much easier if the movie sucked. It's a complicated issue, and I don't have a clean answer for you. I'll tell you this: my guess, if Francis Ford Coppola knew now,
he knew about it all along. He produced Clown House. He knew about it all along. He knew exactly what.
So he just believed enough in the filmmaker that he figured the talent.
He also knows what Jeepers Creepers is about, and how he's starting to apologize for it. It's even more prevalent in the second one. he is working out.
Is he apologizing for it?
Oh yeah, he's apologized quite a bit through interviews. Whether you believe him or not is entirely up to you. I mean, I don't know the man, but like, it's.
So, I appreciate that.
Just because he's a monster and he's paid for his monstrous crimes, he's trying to work out his demons in an art form, and I don't think he should be punished for that. Well, if you want to punish him for his crimes, I get it.
I'm not punishing it. I'm just having the conversation.
And I think his movie should be released.
But I think you are sort of punishing that, saying, I like it even less because,
I'm being honest. I'm not saying that's right.
Yeah, I know you are. But
here's what I'm struggling with. In the year 2019, there's certain filmmakers, their movies are not being released and they're being held hostage by studios for allegations that have not been substantiated. And
when are they going to stop?
And they are not putting the supposed crime or alleged crime into the films that they're making, but they're just not releasing them.
Yeah.
Baby Driver is a great movie. If it had been released 6 months after its summer release, it would have tanked because of Kevin Spacey being in it, and it's a weird time for this. If he's apologized, I think he should have a right to earn a living and do what he does.
Look, I understand why people run away from Victor Salva. I get it. It is not an easy conversation to have. One of the things I think makes this a little more palatable for me is that he's already gone to jail and will always be in some sort of jail because of it, because he got caught. But considering like some of the artists that I love truly and deeply are exercising their demons in a rather healthy way, I might add, in an art form, and trying to tackle with that psyche, I am not going to condemn them for it. There's a lot of mean people, like people still in jail. The Marquis de Sade was a serial rapist, and he talked about...
At no point was I defending the Marquis de Sade, but the point is, it makes me uncomfortable. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's wrong, but it does. It does make me uncomfortable.
It is a good movie, though. We can all agree it's a good movie.
It's a slippery slope, too, because I don't believe in... what I said before is usually I just try and separate myself unless it's insinuating itself into it. And in a way, I feel like this one kind of is asking me to confront it.
Yeah.
So... if asked to confront it, I think you're fucking gross, dude. And I think, working yourself out, you deserve to have that right to work your shit out in the art. But should I pay to participate in that? I don't know. But the other side of the argument is that once you start down the slippery slope, well, let's just stop re-releasing Roman Polanski movies. Because that dude's a fucking predator. And you know what? Stanley Kubrick psychologically destroyed Shelley Duvall. And that wasn't just about him getting a performance out of her. He fucking enjoyed doing it because he was a shithead about that.
She did work after that movie.
She worked. She worked a lot.
She did just fine. She did all these fairy tales.
But the point is, once we start saying, well, this guy did this, so we shouldn't watch any of his stuff, where does it end?
It's censorship.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, because it's directly asking me to confront that component, that does make me feel a little bit grosser about the movie than I would otherwise.
Polanski's not making a movie about...
but this is horror. This is where the ugly can get explored and celebrated. I'm not saying drama doesn't, but this is something where, taboo subjects are played around and poked with.
He's using it to deal with his, the predator instinct, and the monster is sort of the physical manifestation of his child molesting instinct or whatever. That's fucked up and gross. But make a painting, draw it out, write a journal entry or whatever. I don't know. Somehow profiting off of that in any way seems gross to me.
Okay.
And participating in it. And I think we can wrap it up because we've kind of stopped talking about the movie at some point, and that's
what I was afraid of with this. Is
I'm torn about that aspect of the movie. On a basic monster movie level, I can have fun with it in the way I could with a Friday the 13th or a Nightmare on Elm Street franchise.
Yeah.
But those are sort of, as much as I love them, they're empty and fun. But if this is seriously about a child molester making things okay for himself, it's a shade grosser than I want.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so at number 22, I have one of the movies we are talking about. One of the movies that I chose and I utterly find fascinating is Victor Salva's Jeepers Creepers. I don't know more, like I said, we are going to talk about it, so I'll keep this short and sweet. But 22, Jeepers Creepers.
All right. Again, it didn't quite make my list. It's not necessarily controversy around the movie. I'm with you for the first third of that movie.
Yep.
But we'll talk about it.
Yep. I agree. Yeah.
In 22nd position.
22nd. All right. I don't know if I'm going to get beaten up about this one. And there are technically other versions of this that you could look at, but it's the Grindhouse experience. The movie Grindhouse, directed by Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino. So much fun. 3 hour plus movie in cinemas, because we have these two films that are cut up with missing reels and these wild coming attractions, some of which were produced and turned into movies. Machete came out of this, and
Shotgun,
and Hobo with the Shotgun. And I want to see that one with Nicolas Cage, but it was never made. I've always I really I put it on my 10 best of that particular year, and I clung more to Death Proof.
Really?
Even though I thought it's too good to be a Grindhouse movie. Like, this is only my criticism of it. It's too good to be a Grindhouse movie. Planet Terror felt like an authentic Grindhouse movie. Last time I watched it, I warmed up to Planet Terror a lot more. It is creative. It is Robert Rodriguez doing what he does best. And I like both movies for different reasons. And the only thing that I don't know if it's even worth mentioning in here is like the horrific stuff that happened to Rose McGowan. It was around this era, and she's so prominent in Planet Terror and
kind of
makes her appearance in Death Proof. I don't know if was she having an affair with Robert Rodriguez at the time?
At this point, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. It was kind of a complicated time there, but I really like it. It's the rare Quentin Tarantino film that lost a lot of money.
Well, I mean, I'm halfway there with you. I really like Planet Terror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think Death Proof is easily the worst thing that Quentin Tarantino's put his name to, personally. Again, it's not terrible. I don't think he's going to make an outright terrible movie, but it's never been my favorite one. And I also find it really weird that they played Planet Terror first. Mm-hmm. For me, like, I guess the marquee name on, like, Rodriguez has his audience, but Tarantino was going to be supposedly the guy bringing butts into theaters.
Yeah.
But because the pacing of Death Proof is so sluggish, especially the first hour of that, both of these movies, by the way, benefit of having things taken away from them. Well, you can
watch the stand. I haven't watched the standalone Planet Terror, but I have Death Proof.
Yeah, and they don't need another 15 minutes. Neither movie needs another 15 minutes, but you can watch them that way. But for me, I think I would have put Death Proof first, and then that energetic sort of, say what you will about Planet Terror, it fucking moves. Yeah. At least your ass
lots of energy
be numb by the time you left the theater. I thought that was a mistake, and again, for me, I'm soft for zombies. I just thought the first half was so significantly better than the second that it kind of spoiled the overall meal.
I like, for some reason, I indulge with movies where women are allowed to talk and to talk, in an honest way, and they're away from guys, and that's what I clung to with Death Proof, and I thought it was Tracy Toms, I think that's her name. She was in the original cast of Rent on Broadway, and she hasn't really gotten great film roles. Tarantino wrote a great role for her in there. I just really enjoy it. I'm not sure. I've never ranked Tarantino's movies to say which one I would think is the worst. This is the least prominent for sure, but it stayed with me.
I get what you're saying at Dubray with, here was a chance for women to talk, openly and vulgar, just like guys do, the sort of locker room talk. But after a while, it becomes like a little bit of an endurance test, and it would be the same for guys with me. Honestly, I think if they would have jettisoned the first act of Death Proof and just focused on the one group of women, and like maybe one by one Russell picks it off, I think the movie would have flowed a lot better.
Mm-hmm. And it didn't feel like a Grindhouse movie to me.
Now, have you noticed like the tie-ins between the two movies?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because in Planet Terror on the radio, there's this the death of Jungle Julia.
Yeah.
And so that's multiple. You're like, oh, that's a character in the next movie, and so we get a little bit of a hint because that's the benefit of that order.
Right.
We get some foreshadowing that she's gonna die at the end.
If you're really, really paying attention, which to be fair, the first.
Which I'm a movie nerd, and I'll do that with that movie.
But like the first time you watched the movie, did you clock on the radio? Oh, I should make a note of it. No,
I was clocking the double casting, and
I have nothing but love for Planet Terror. I think when Rodriguez does sort of almost like a gore fest, zombie fest, is when I think he's in his wheelhouse. Am I wrong to say that maybe From Dusk Till Dawn might be his finest hour? I think Sin City's great, but when he's doing that sort of over-the-top, goofy, slimy kind of movie, monster movie, is where I'm like...
Because he would do the kids' movies, and then he would do this stuff, and it was very strange. And he's got his Once Upon a Time.
It's no surprise to me that the two Rodriguez films that I visit the most are essentially slimy, gory, over-the-top monster movies. In Dusk Till Dawn and Planet Terror.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, my 22nd place might be another left field choice. It's an Australian film. It's found footage, and it kind of gets under your skin. From 2008, from Joel Anderson, Lake Mungo. I want to put a special mention as well to a Canadian-British sort of hybrid-made found footage movie called My Little Eye. I don't think enough people saw it because so many people just fucking dismiss found footage. And it's pretty early. My Little Eye's from 2002, so it's pretty early in the realm. And it's, the toxic environment of the internet, and these people think they're in a reality show, but they start to doubt whether or not who's watching them and why, and if the legitimacy of it. It seems like it should have been made this year, but it was made in 2002, and it's underseen. So shout out to My Little Eye, but Lake Mungo punches you right in the heart. It's a horror movie that punches you right in the heart. Lee is nodding in agreement. And again, the movie works enough just with you dealing with this family and the loss that they're dealing with. Their daughter drowned at Lake Mungo, and they're trying to understand the circumstances of the death. And that itself, I think, would have made a movie. But it also slowly just creeps you out. It just closes its fist over you and drops more and more information, and you think it's going somewhere, and then it goes another way, and then it almost abandons it. Okay, maybe we're not being supernatural. Maybe it's just grief. And then they just hit you again. Like, you're constantly being surprised by the movie, and it's a walk. It's not a run. It's an experiential, emotional movie, and check out Lake Mungo.
I'm going to say nothing else, but spoilers, we will be talking about this movie again.
Okay. Have you seen
and I've heard you mention it, especially, you talked about it on your found footage special. Yeah, and so it's been on my list, but I have not seen it. Just another one that I absolutely have to see, right?
Both of those, if you can do the found footage. Again,
I can. Yeah, I have more problems with torture porn than I do with found footage.
If you're one of those people that just won't watch found footage, well, then I guess neither of these movies will work for you.
I'm not sure I'd be here if I can...
Yeah, exactly.
It has one of these, it has all the elements of a great found footage movie. It has one of the rarest elements where I like all of the characters.
Yeah, there's no, where they aren't jerks,
sad. I mean, we were talking about the others being sad, but...
It is sad, but I don't want to say anything else because we are going to talk about it again.
All right, so that was my 22, Lake Mungo. What's your 21, brother?
21, I had a film, I was overseas when I saw this, and the two films I saw that night really hit me, out of the park. And it also started this invasion of Asian horror that tended to really sort of marinate in this decade of horror. So I have Ju-on the Grudge at 21. I understand why people don't like it. There's some problems with the narrative. It feels more episodic than a straight through narrative, and it's a kind of horror film where it asks more questions than answers them, which can be frustrating and infuriating to the viewer. I like the rules of this universe of our monster. I think it's a really, really creepy entity that hunts down people once you become part of its universe.
Well, that's sort of the thing, right? The rules of the universe is once you see the Grudge, you're fucked.
Yeah.
The end.
Yeah, really.
Pretty simple.
There's some sequences in this movie that still haunt me when the security guard is watching the
recording of the person who gets lured into the hallway, and then like the eyes come up.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
There's something about Asian horror that they get right.
They
how
do.
to freak people out.
Yeah. I have
Junji Ito is another comic book artist who like he does more page, but like it stays with you. And The Grudge stayed with me. Some of the sequels are awful. The American remakes not so much as well. But I gotta give a shout out to Ju-on The Grudge. Yeah. I get once again why people don't like it. That has some narrative problems and it does ask more questions. But at the same time, I bought this ride, hook, line, and sinker.
It was on my runner-up list. I really wanted to include it. And it's funny, all the stuff that you're mentioning is kind of negatives about it are the things I really enjoy about it.
Yeah.
I just like how it works. I don't like the American version. I really do not like the American version at all.
That was my problem because I think I saw the American version first.
I did.
And it kind of spoiled the meal a little bit for me.
Yeah.
I just didn't get it. And I have some Asian extreme movies on the list. This would probably be an honorable mention. It's no means a bad movie. It just doesn't work for me in the same way it does for other people.
Yeah.
But I have said in the past, if David Lynch made a proper horror movie, this is probably what it would look or feel like, right?
Because it doesn't follow
a straight narrative.
But
it's scary, and it's using the scares to at least tell a very slight story, but a story.
Yeah.
Right? So respect for the choice.
21?
Yes, please.
Yes. This is one I've watched a lot. I actually thought it was going to be higher, but then I did the thing is this scary and is it aging well or not? I actually show it in my creative writing class, if you can believe that. It's Secret Window.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I really like Johnny Depp in it. I like the novella. I like the source material. And we talked about with Stir of Echoes, and I mean he's in quite. He can have some bad movies in there, but he also wrote Jurassic Park. I mean I think he's quite a talented filmmaker, and this is another one where it's the setting and the location, and it worked really, really well for me. I like Stephen King stuff that's set in kind of a lake community, and I like when he has pieces about writers.
Maybe I need to give it another day in court.
And I've shown it to students, and they're blown away. Like when the plot twist happens, when the reveal happens, they're like, and because I've watched it so many times, like how did you not see this coming? Yeah. And I read it before I watched it, so I knew when I watched the movie originally. But I like how it leads into it and how there are very subtle hints throughout.
When the novella came out, it was sandwiched with like
Langoliers was in the collection.
No, that's 4 Past Midnight.
Yeah,
right? Langoliers. So, but at the time, it seemed really fresh reading it. But by the time they got around to making the movie, these sort of gotcha endings were a thing. And for me, it was a Stephen King adaptation that had Johnny Depp, Maria Bello, Timothy Hutton, and John Turturro.
John Turturro is really over the top.
With that cast and with that shell of a story, and with me being such a fan of Stir of Echoes, who David Koepp also adapted, I got my hopes high. And I think that might have hurt my enjoyment of the movie.
And maybe my hopes were a little bit lower, so it overperformed for me.
So, I'd give it another day in court. I just remember wanting... That was my sensation of the movie. I wish it was better than it was.
Well, and I like Johnny Depp when he goes full on dark. I mean, he always flirts with dark characters, but there's always some sort of we kind of end up loving him, or especially in the Tim Burton films, he's likable even though he might be a quasi villain. I like when he goes full on dark, and the end of this thing is not
he is getting
not likable Johnny Depp at all.
He's getting to the point where he's starting, for me anyway, to confuse quirk with character.
But at that time when it was released, was that the case?
There was a lot of.
Was this a year after Pirates? I think it was a year after Pirates. So
there was a lot of Johnny Depp isms.
He was still underrated, I think, at that point, and then he became really big at that time.
Do you have thoughts on Secret Window?
Secret Window, I thought was okay. I kind of guessed the twists early on, so once again, it kind of became a waiting game for me, where I stayed to the end of the movie thinking, well, was I right? Yes, I was right. It's sort of, I don't know, I think Stephen King has even done those twists before anyways. I could be wrong. Once again, the stakes were high for me because it's David Koepp? I say
David
Koepp.
Koepp, yeah.
David Koepp.
Yeah.
I always think it's kept, but I don't
No,
know
you're
for
probably
sure.
right.
Yeah.
Hooked on Phonics worked for me.
I'm basing that pronunciation on Steven Spielberg mentioning his name in
Yeah.
the documentary
Oh,
about
okay.
Jurassic Park.
Oh, okay.
He called him David Koepp, so
Yeah,
I
yeah, okay.
David
You know what?
Good enough for
You're
Spielberg,
right.
good enough for us.
David Koepp. Once again, it's nothing like really wrong about the movie. To me, it just sort of fell in the category of sort of really good Johnny Depp performance in a mediocre movie, and that's where I kind of put Secret Window.
Yeah. In 21st place for me, from 2006, one of my favorite indie horror directors, Larry Fessenden, made a movie called The Last Winter.
Yeah.
I've heard you talk about this.
It's a really good suspenseful movie, and hopefully, I know I'm going to be talking about Section 9 later, hopefully you guys will too as well, but it's that sort of oppressively psychological environmental movie, and it seeps into your bones. I don't think it's quite as good as Section 9, but by comparing it to it, it's putting it in good company in my books. I really, really like The Last Winter. Slow burn, psychological destruction. This oil company is doing this drilling. An environmental representative is there to see what the impact is and if they should stop. There's built-in tension between the characters. And then everybody starts getting infected. If there's a better word for it or not, something is happening with the thaw, and it's affecting people. And the creepy thing about it is everybody's affected a little differently. So you just don't know how to deal with the situation. And for me, it really works. It's a patient horror movie. It's not for everyone, but it's definitely for me. 21, Last Winter.
So ends part 1 of our exploration of the naughties, you guys. Part 2 shall be following next week. I hope you like what we're doing, and I hope you hang in there, enjoying the best of the Nazis. As always, I'm your host and random Canadian Larry Parsons. Thank you so much for listening. Please send me feedback at ranknreview@gmail.com. That's ranknreview@gmail.com. Check out the website at ranknreview.ca. Please tell a friend about the podcast. That really helps my audience to grow. And continue listening to Rank and Review.